Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back. We are here for Bets and Banter, and we're talking about UFC 301. It's going down in Rio de Janeiro. It's going down in Brazil, the heart of Brazil, and we're talking about a bunch of Brazilian fighters on the card today. So a lot of great action to get into. If you're new here, welcome aboard. My name's Liam. I pick fights on this channel each and every week, and what we're doing today is we're doing Bets and Banter with our co-host, the normal that you expect here. Just win, baby. Rich is back in the house. How are you, my man?
Yo, bro, doing well. Happy about this card. Got some big bets. A lot to say. But yeah, man, I've looked ahead. Next week isn't so great. So as I was saying off air, I'm going to load up on this one, hit it big, and then next week we're going to be light, man. But yeah, plenty to say this week.
I'd love to hear it. And I feel like when I was doing my first look this week, I planned on coming back to you guys last night. I was literally so exhausted. I would have been worth nothing to you. I was so shot after jiu-jitsu. But in any case, that's a credit to my training partner. So hats off to them. But what we are going to do on this card is we're going to start from the bottom and work our way on up. And I do feel like I've gotten a much better read on some of these matchups by doing the tape. I feel like the tape study's required this week. Sometimes you just look at it and you're like, man, I kind of have a feel for all these matchups. But I noticed some things when I did tape on a lot of these matchups that I wasn't expecting to see. So hopefully that turns into some profits for us. But with that being said, my man, let's start it like we always do from the first fight of the night. We got Alessandro Costa taking on Kevin Borjas. And I bet Kevin Borjas last time out. He was plus 200, I believe, against Joshua Van. And there's a market principle that I always like to look for, which is like a guy goes from being plus 200 to minus 200. Normally, you don't want to bet that guy. Even if it's a matchup that seems favorable, just because the market perception has changed exponentially from fight to fight. But now you're seeing that Joshua Van is kind of as good as advertised, right? Went out there, delivered in that spot, faced some early adversity, but he was able to outwork Borjas down the stretch. I think he even doubled him up on strikes, and Borjas lands a decent number of strikes himself. So that was a really impressive showing from Van. He's been nothing but impressive since arriving in the UFC. And it was unfortunate because I bet Van in his first fight, but I kind of got trapped by the number on that second fight with Borjas. And in this fight, I'm worried that if I play Borjas again, I might be getting trapped by the number again on Borjas because I do think he's got the skills to win this fight. But I also think that Costa has the skills to win this fight. When I look at Costa, he seems like a lot of raw potential. And he's kind of just been fighting, in a hurry, fighting too rushed out there and making some small mistakes that have cost him big fights. But the Erceg fight, for example, he could have had a back take in that fight. And he kind of rushed it, looked for the submissions very aggressively, and was losing position. And Erceg's a good scrambler. So I think that for Costa, that kind of held him back a little bit in that spot. And I think that this is not a easy matchup, but I do think that Borjas is a more limited scrambler compared to somebody like Erceg. I don't know that he's going to have as sophisticated grappling as some of these other opponents from Costa. So I think that Costa on the feet is probably at a deficit in terms of volume, but I think he can compete on power. I think both these guys can land good, hard shots. And then I think that on the mat, I would expect that Costa would have an advantage here. So fun fight, good scrap. Didn't really have strong betting leans here. How about you, Rich? What do you think about this one?
Yeah, I've got a strong lean, man. Borjas is the side. I bet him by KO as well. I don't like Costa. I don't think he's done well in the UFC, obviously. Comes in short notice against Albazi, takes the L, gets knocked out. Fair play, no shame in that. Gets rewarded like the UFC often does. They give him Jimmy Flick, handles him accordingly. And then obviously he gets Erceg, bit of a step up. And he did okay in the Erceg fight. Like you said, he made mistakes though, but he just shows me that his process isn't that good, man. So I think usually if he's going to win a fight, it's going to be by a finish. He catches somebody with a punch, maybe takes advantage of their lack of BJJ and finds a submission. And on the surface, you might say this is the one. It's kind of a binary fight. If Costa wants to win, the path of least resistance would be to take Borjas down, find a submission. We saw on Dana White Contender Series fight that if you want to beat him, you're going to have to mix in the grappling because standing, he's on all the juice and he's a motherfucker, man. He throws volume, he's got power, and he can really hurt you. And I think that's exactly what's going to happen. Costa came up in the Lux organization, which isn't great. So that doesn't mean much to me. And then in the UFC, he's just shown me that he hasn't got the goods, man. And then you go look at Borjas. He's got everything I like, to be honest. Heart, desire to win, power in his hands. He won't accept bottom position. And most importantly, when he does get taken down, he doesn't give the back, man. He'll put his butt to the mat, he'll scoot to the cage, and he'll work his way up, and he'll do the fundamentals. He won't do anything stupid. He won't do anything risky. So if you bet Costa by sub, rip your tickets up. Borjas is going to KO him, and it's going to be a good start to the night, man. That's some confidence.
Fair play. Yeah, this is not one that I felt super confident about. I do see that it's chalked out to end inside the distance, which is interesting, looking at a bantamweight contest. But I kind of understand it with the way that these guys fight. But I think Borjas is really tough. He's kind of showed that in the Victor Diaz fight as well. To your point, he's not an easy guy to submit on the mat, but he has been submitted in the past. Henzo Mendez, I believe it was, submitted him, earlier on in his run. So it's a scrap. But yeah, if you think the fight's going to play out on the feet, then it makes sense to be playing Borjas here because he's a little bit more consistent with his output and his offense. And we saw that he could take an ass whooping last time too, right? Like against Joshua Van, he was taking a lot of big, clean shots, and he was willing to keep coming forward and throwing. Please go ahead.
Absolutely. And you can give him a pass for that Van loss, man. Van, he made some great adjustments in that fight, put the pressure on him. It's not easy fighting going backwards. It drained his cardio. Van would fuck Costa up as well. So, yeah, there's that. And I just think desire to win's a big thing, man. And yeah, he's young, he's hungry. And in that fight with Diaz on the Dana White Contender Series, not once did he wilt, not once did he think, fuck it, I'm a round down, I'll just take the L. He'll fight for your money. He's dog odds. It was kind of a no-brainer for me, man.
Fair play. The only other thing I would say to credit Costa is just if you look at the quality of the losses, Albazi, technically a top 5 guy, Erceg, obviously, coming from a low ranked position, but he's a title challenger this weekend. So he's regarded as a top guy in the division as well. So he has lost to only the best guys, but he hasn't beaten anybody of substance either. So it's kind of a little bit of talent evaluation, and I respect the talent evaluation that you've got going. So fair play. Next up, my man, we've got a minus 500 favorite here, shockingly, right? In Ismail Bonfim. But you look at the other side, and Vince from Hell Pichel, an older guy, a guy who's been around for a long time, really struggled to stay healthy and stay inside the octagon. Think he's dealt with some training room injuries and other things as well. So how do you feel about this one, Rich? We'll kick it to you first.
So to be kind of respectful, Vink's just old as fuck, man. And I can't lay the money on him. I don't think he's the one. I think it's a case, when I hear him in interviews, it's a case of like, he's still got the mentality. He still wants to fight, but the body just can't keep up. It's kind of a sad story, to be honest. I think he probably should hang him up. He's had some fortunate matchups most recently. He could have had worse matchups. And I just think that they're doing him dirty here, sending him to Brazil. Against Bonfim, who's juiced. It's the Bonfim brother who likes to stand, who's got the patience, who's got the striking, and he's pretty good at it. We seen with Benoit Saint Denis. If you want to fuck this guy up, man, you've got to take him down, nullify that striking ability. But I just don't think Pichel, at this age, has the athleticism, has the juice in him to do what Benoit did. So, yeah, I think at some point, Bonfim's going to catch him and put him away. I like late props, man. Round 2, round 3 for the KO, specifically round 3, because Bonfim, one thing I do like about him is that patience with the striking. He won't rush anything. He'll put the feints out there, make you bite on him. And I think eventually it gets to Pichel. And, yeah, I could see a late finish, man. And also some notable things to mention. I seen on Twitter today, Pichel's engaging with people, them fucking weirdos, Angelo or whatever the one is. I don't even know the names of their site, man. Maybe you do. But yeah, them weirdos who tag all the fighters when they're doing the breakdowns. He's been engaging with them. I don't know about you, but if I'm betting money on somebody on fight week, I don't want to see him having Twitter wars with 2 fucking dorks off the internet. So that's another reason not to bet Pichel. So Bonfim's the side. Obviously, you can't play the money line. Maybe parlay him if that's your thing, but late KO is the one for me.
Yeah, I've had a really fun time betting on on bomb theme fights so far in the UFC. The one time that I got it wrong, I bet Abasov, I think like a quarter unit to win by submission, because I had looked on his record. I'm like, man, this guy's lost some fights by sub. Abasov's going to look to push it there. He's going to look to wrestle. He's going to look to grapple, try and get a hold of this guy. And Bonfim showed in that fight, sprawling, brawling, keeping the fight upright, using his distance management, keeping behind the jab. And I was like, man, this guy's pretty good. But pretty good is not minus 300 against Benoit Saint Denis. So obviously I took the money line on Benoit in that fight. He was like plus 250. I also had against Terrence McKinney, Bonfim round 2 knockout. He does take his time. He does like to let the fight develop. We saw in Contender Series, he was in no rush to take his opponent out of there. He landed a couple decent shots on McKinney in round 1, but you saw that he was waiting, making reads, kind of feinting him along the cage and waiting for his opponent to get tired. I think Vince Pichel, a lot of what he's relied on throughout his career is the fact that he can outlast opponents, make them tired, fight at a really high pace rate. When you're 40, 41 years of age, starts to lose that ability to compete at a really high pace for long periods of time. And we saw against Marco Madsen. Marco Madsen obviously comes from a high athletic pedigree. He's an older guy in the division, and he doesn't have a very long future with the UFC, I would imagine. And he was able to go out there and outlast him, not only on the ground, where he got some takedowns. Obviously, Vince got some moral victories, some takedowns of his own, things like that. But you look at how the fight played out, and it just seemed to me like we were seeing a guy in Vince Pichel slow down pretty tremendously, not only in terms of cardio, but in terms of his hand speed. He should be able to outstrike a guy like Madsen pretty comfortably, you would think, but he did look to be slowing, in his combination. So I think that Bonfim is going to have too much firepower on the feet. And the guys that have submitted him on the ground, let's just give him some credit, right? Like Benoit Saint Denis and Renato Moicano are the two most recent guys to submit him on the ground. Name the bum among them. It's like, there ain't one, right? Those are both top guys in the UFC, ranked lightweights. And so, yeah, one was a really long time ago. He went on an excellent win streak, and then he was overhyped coming into the Benoit fight. I don't think that means he's a bum or a wasted prospect or something, but we do know that he could lose fights, laying a minus 600, whatever price. It's tough. So I wouldn't get to it that way. I would look, like you're saying, at a couple props, maybe late round props, and hope that Vince Pichel, who's a tough bastard, can stay in there for a long time and drag it out a little bit, get you a little more value on that. The other thing I'll mention is just that you look at the Gregor Gillespie fight. That was like the best of Vince Pichel, and he kept trying to get back up, but eventually he ran out of gas and enthusiasm, because it's exhausting to fight somebody like that. And I don't expect that kind of game plan from Bonfim, obviously. But I think that if Vince tries to force that grappling game plan, eventually he'll wrestle himself into a hole and just be gassed. And I think that if that's the case, Bonfim will find a way to finish, whether it's on the feet or on the ground. So, yeah, I think Bonfim's got him.
I seen Vink posted that he's got 30 pounds to lose. I don't know whether that was a joke or what, but he posted that on Twitter. It does seem excessive, but I don't know whether he's trolling. 30 pounds seems like a lot, but if that is the case, it's going to deplete him more at this age, etc. So the late finish could definitely be on.
The only other thing I'll mention is the body kicks from Benoit Saint Denis set up the grappling. Like, I know Benoit had a lot of grappling success in that fight with the takedowns, but he had landed probably 7, 8, 10 flush body kicks. And I think that's what made Bonfim tired, because we've seen Bonfim have 15-minute fights before and look totally fine in terms of cardio. So, I won't, knock you for taking the late props on Pichel, but frankly, I just don't see it here, Dixon. That it's a fight I think they're setting him up for success, and they didn't put his brother on the card, right? Sometimes we've seen the Bonfim bros together, and it kind of becomes a little bit of pressure on both guys. I think they're just setting him up. Hey, here's a matchup we wanted you to have. We tried to set this up before, and I think they're trying to put him in a highlight position and get him back on track. Both these guys have fallen on hard times, right? We were there to cash Dalby. We were there to cash Benoit Saint Denis. So now let's see if the Bonfim bros can get some equity back, right? A little bit of clout back. But in any case, my man, we can move to this next fight. We got Dione Barbosa taking on Ernesta Careskate. I'm really not too sure about the name. I listen to these fights on mute. These were some of the last fights that I watched before I got on here. And I think that Careskats has no real ground game to speak of. I think she's a tough enough girl. I think she tries to work back up to her feet. She's got a decent amount of cage wrestling experience, because every girl that she fights pushes her back to the cage, takes her down. But I don't like the looks I'm seeing from her. The girls that she's fighting, I don't think they're very high level. I don't think that they're, extremely skilled, but they're showing some persistence, some aggression. They're getting in her face. They're landing shots. They're taking her down. And I think that Barbosa on the other side, I've seen her look okay in fights, not, blowing your hair back, super impressive every time out. But in most of her fights, she has opportunities to win and finish the fight. Like you look at the fight with Jenna Bishop, landed big, hard shots, rocked Jenna Bishop. Jenna Bishop, tough as a, $2 steak, right? As Jim Ross would say, this girl taking flying knees to the face, just like ding, ding, just like getting popped back like a pest dispenser, and just not showing much of it, right? Taking her down anyway, figuring out a way to get on top. And I thought that Barbosa won that fight. If you're just asking me for my opinion, I thought she won that 2 rounds, to 1. And I thought that Bishop won the 3rd round. I thought that the 2nd round was really close. Bishop got on top late in the round. But I thought that Barbosa had done the better work throughout the round. And when I'm looking at Barbosa's other fights, she had a catch weight at 130 pounds. She's on the back. She's landing a bunch of shots from the back. She's going for submissions. She hasn't finished all of her fights, but she's aggressive. She wants to be out there. She wants to get these takedowns. I've seen her get dropped, get right back up, keep fighting. So I don't think she's, going to be scared to engage in this fight. So I think that the positives for the Careskats side is like she continues to throw late on into fights. I think she's got less musculature, right? So she's probably just a little bit better natural with the long muscles that just go in all night, throwing a bunch of volume. But I don't know that there's as much sting behind the shots as Barbosa, as much heft or weight behind it. And then I think that the grappling is different levels here. So I think Barbosa is going to win this fight. I'm not the kind of guy that advocates, huge money line prices in WMMA. I never do that. But I do think that this is a fight where both women have a path to a finish. I've seen both these women just take clean punches right to the face. And also I think on the ground, there's a little bit of suspect nature, from the underdog here. So how do you feel about this one, Rich?
Yeah, I'd say Dixon, instead of wasting your money on Vink by sub, you should be putting it on Barbosa by sub. You'd have a hell of a more chance of it cashing. This fight, I really wanted to bet this Ernesta chick, man. She's got good cardio, which I love for women's MMA. She's got good size, which I like for women's MMA. But, I did some digging, came across a fight of hers on YouTube, which you have to watch. If you're betting on this matchup, you need to go watch this fight. And it is Ernesta against a woman called Blot, a very unfortunate name, but yeah, Blot. And it's the biggest robbery ever, man. Ernesta got taken down repeatedly, laid on. To be fair, this girl didn't do much damage, but, just through sheer control, she should have won that fight. She got robbed of it, so Ernesta won. And that was all I needed to see, man. You can't make up that type of wrestling, I don't know what you want to call it, shitness, disadvantage. She was just so poor, man. Gap. That's the one. Barbosa, she's good at jiu-jitsu. She's a legit black belt. And she's got these funky little takedowns that she does, man. They're very unorthodox. She kind of like just bum rush you a little bit and do some outside trip real quick. It's not traditional single legs, doubles or anything like that. But she will get you down. Ernesta, she doesn't know anything about range management. So she's going to be there for the level changes and the takedowns. The only concern I would have in betting Barbosa in this fight is the cardio. Ernesta from Instagram, she is training. It's pretty intense. I think she's going to have cardio for days, but if you're on your back, it ain't going to mean shit. I've hit the submission round 1, round 2 as well, just in case. But I think once Barbosa gets her down, she's a fish. She's a white belt. She ain't getting back up, and she most likely gets finished by submission in round 1, man. That skill gap in the BJJ, too much. And that wrestling takedown defense, it isn't there, man. And like you said, even on the feet, yeah, she's got volume, but she's got no power. She's a little energizer bunny. She'll throw 40 punch combinations. But unless you have a serious cardio dump, you're good, man. And I just think anytime she wants to, Barbosa can take her down and fuck her up. So I'm surprised by the money line, man. It was minus 200 range. That's not my style. So I jumped on the submission plus 250 and the rounds.
Hell yeah, man. I do think it's probably going to be an early finish. I think it's probably going to be on the ground. But, I think, like I said, if Careskats is able to extend the fight, make this fight go a little bit longer, I think that's her path to winning the fight. I think that's also her path to a finish. I haven't looked at the round props, but I'm sure it's like a huge number for her to win late. And I think that that's her path. You know, we saw Jenna Bishop in round 3 have her most success, get to top position. And it looked like maybe Barbosa was coasting a little bit because she thought she had banked some rounds. So a couple of interesting things.
Yeah.
Now,
Sorry,
please,
bro. I was just going to say, Jenna Bishop's a motherfucker, man. That's a tough fight to have on your record, especially early when you haven't got many fights under your belt. Jenna Bishop would sub Ernesta in round 1 all day, every day. So, yeah, there's no shame.
I agree.
You know,
she's a judo and a jiu-jitsu black belt, you know, and I think that's shown in her fights. I would also just say the one thing she does that bothers me is sometimes the head and arm throws and shit. It's like classic WMMA, but she also has a nice ability to just like time level changes into underhooks and then trip the back leg. And I think that that's a really effective takedown for MMA. People are standing upright all the time trying to strike. And I think that Ernesta, great example, right? Very upright fighter. And I think that those takedowns will work. So that's my ultimate read here. Give me Dione Barbosa. And I think she wins inside the distance. Might look at the fight not to go the distance potentially here. Next up, we got Mauricio Ruffie taking on Jamie Malarkey, and we'll kick this one over to Rich first because I think he's got stronger thoughts than I do anyway. How do you feel, Rich?
I think that if you're max betting Ruffie, you need your head looking at, which I've seen on MMA Twitter. People are weird, man. It's just like all they've got really is Malarkey's chinny because he's had like 7 fights and he's lost 5 by KO. Yeah, that's not good stats, but he's been fighting fuckers, man. Jalen Turner, you know, people like that. Volkanovski back in the day, that was one of his TKO losses. Who the fuck is Ruffie for? Nobody. His regionals are shit. He was getting finished on the regionals, tagged on the regionals. You know, he's 2-0 down to some bum Russian, finishes with leg kicks, and now all of a sudden, like, he's guard and people want to whack 5 units on him. It's strange to me. It's going to be his UFC debut, hometown pressure, the rest of it. And out of the fighting nerds team, or whatever they're called, you know, Borralho, Ruffie, and Gene Silva, I think he's the one to let the team down. I think he's probably going to get knocked out. I've bet it as well. Malarkey ITD because it was plus 400. Yeah, no flies on me, man. Fucking, I know the side to be on, and it ain't fucking Ruffie. He's just not good, man. Calf kicks. So what? What happens if your calf kicks don't work? He doesn't have great hands. He's a bit too patient with his striking. And unlike the guy we was mentioning earlier, it's not by design. He's not patient because he's an educated striker. It's just because he's shit and he doesn't know what to throw. All he's got is some calf kicks. And if you wilt to the calf kicks, they put it on you and put the fight to bed. But Malarkey's experienced. I understand he's hot and cold. Sometimes he comes in there and he's underwhelming. But then he can come in there like he did against Devontae Smith as an underdog, big underdog, and he can fuck shit up, man. So I'm buying the dip. I'm having the dog money, and I'm having a very generous plus 400 on the ITD, man. Yeah, that's how I feel about it.
Fair enough, my man. I'm like a never Jamie Malarkey guy. I'll be honest with you. I've never liked Jamie. I think I've bet a handful of times on his submission prop in fights where I thought he had like a huge advantage. And in almost all those fights, he gets like 9 minutes of control time, dominates the fight, wrestles and grapples the guy easily, and just doesn't submit him at any point. Never even attempts a submission. So I think that experiment's over for me, right? But then you look on the other side, and it's like Ruffie, every fight he's ever had is ended by knockout, for and against. That last time out, it did look like he could have lost the decision there. You know, his opponent is like a decision fighter, kind of goes out there, not really looking to finish people super aggressively. He's just trying to, you know, win the minutes. And that was what he was on his way to doing. Ruffie is able to take him out there. I think Ruffie's a fun guy. I think he's a dangerous guy. I do think, you know, he's got some marketing potential. And I think they tried to give him an opponent where he can maximize his skill set, right? Like his skill set is I can knock people out. Here's a guy that can get knocked out. And if you remember, like even against Muhammad Naimov, I really regret not taking that one pre-flop, but just like I had talked about, I was like, yeah, Naimov's going to be undersized, but like he's going to throw and like Malarkey's just there to be hit. So like, is he really minus 500 against anybody? And he's really not, you know, it's just like Malarkey's this kind of guy who, even if he's much better than somebody or he's got more experience, it's like he just puts himself in kind of vulnerable situations at times. Even the fights he wins, I think he gets hurt sometimes, but it is a spot where Ruffie is not more proven than Malarkey, right? Like it's like Malarkey has lost to guys that you'd expect him to lose to, guys that, a couple times he's been surprised, but even still, the market was all behind him against Naimov, right? I was one of the few people saying, I don't know, maybe he's got a shot here. And then you look, now it's like everybody's all in on Ruffie here. I don't like to be with the popular market sentiment. So for me, it just feels like an easy pass. If I'm team Never Malarkey and Ruffie feels a little bit mushy, I'll probably just leave it all alone. But the other thing is, Ruffie was well on his way to a decision last time out, but all of his fights have ended by KO. So I think people could get burned here. The one way is if, they're all in on the fight not to go the distance, and then it just sneaks over, goes to a decision. Then even, it could go either way, because that's probably a fight that people aren't expecting. But for me, Ruffie just doesn't do enough on the feet to merit winning rounds and minutes unless he lands big shots more often than not. What did you have to add there?
Yeah, one thing I say is, man, and I'll be bold about it so my haters can come back next week. Ruffie, no matter what happens in this fight, Ruffie will not win by KO. So yeah, someone can screenshot that and fucking bring it back to me next week. He won't win by KO, man.
Somebody can clip it.
Clip that shit.
There you go. All right, bold take from our guy Rich. And that's it's a weird fight. Jamie Malarkey kind of feels out of place among this cast of characters, but Ruffie is still a big unknown. Only 10 professional fights. So let's find out what he's got. Next up, my man, we got Joaquim Silva taking on Drakkar Klose. Another fight that kind of feels weird and out of place. Obviously, Neto BJJ, a Brazilian guy. But he just has a reputation for kind of being like an apex fighter of late, just going out there, kind of being a workhorse for the company, taking some of these fights that are not desirable, right? Arman Sarukian, tough spot. I think that was on short notice as well. But we saw he's a dangerous guy. He landed a huge shot in that fight. But you also see the limitations of his skill set. Jesse Ronson, winnable fight for him. He got the win there. Clay Guida, winnable fight for him. He got the win there. But Ricky Glenn, a guy that you'd expect him to be able to beat, right? Ricky Glenn's got the longest neck in the history of the division. His chin in subsequent bouts, prior bouts, has looked a little bit sketchy himself. He was able to take him out there and very quickly. That really surprised me at the time, Rich. I was like, man, maybe Neto BJJ is not as good as I thought. And before that, getting knocked out by Nasrat Hakparast, I mean, that is something I really was not impressed by. So that's 2 in a row. And the wins before that, Jerry Gordon. I mean, Jerry Gordon, his only problem throughout his career has been his chin, his inability to take big shots on the chin. And also he slowed down just a touch in that third round in that fight, gave Joaquim Silva a path back into it. But Vince Michel beat him back in the day. Silva just seems to me like a slight level below Drakkar Klose. Although Drakkar is not a guy that I've been in love with either in his UFC run. You look at his fights, Joe Selecki, kind of a meme-like outcome, but it was cool. He got the knockout, did what he was supposed to do there, slammed out of a submission attempt, beat Rafa Garcia, another workhorse. The Brandon Jenkins fight, I throw that one out of the sample, don't care about it. Beneil Dariush, I mean, it was a crazy war, right? They both had each other on skates, and I think Beneil's chin has deteriorated since then. But even at the time, Beneil Dariush is a guy that is, kind of cursed with a bad chin, right? Against Alexander Hernandez, a guy that he has better skills than in all positions, he got brutally knocked out, right? It's like anything can happen in a fight. Edson Barbosa, I don't know that he lost a single second in that fight until he got kneed in the face and the fight was over. So I think that Beneil is kind of a weird fight to have in the sample as well. But beating Yagos, beating Bobby Green, beating Lando Venata, those are all pretty quality fighters and the kind of tier of fighter that I see Joaquim Silva on. So for me, it just seems like Drakkar is probably going to get one over the line here. I think he's got enough power to knock him out on the feet. He's not, Mike Tyson with the hands or something crazy, but he does have, punching power. He can go out there and trade a little bit. And I think that Silva has got a sketchy chin. So even in the Arman fight, Silva had him hurt really bad and then got hurt himself really bad not too long after. He got hurt earlier in that fight. Arman was mostly looking to wrestle there. So I think that in this fight, Drakkar is going to be looking to throw hands, looking to hurt him. And I think he's capable of doing it. So it's not a fight that I feel bullish on from a betting perspective, but again, it just feels like Drakkar rightful favorite here. I think the line's about right. How about you, Rich?
I was going to say exactly the same thing. Not a fight that I'm bullish on at all. I like Closer to win. If I was going to bet him, I'd take the ITD over the money line simply because 5 of the losses from Joaquin, 4 of them have been via a finish of some sort, 3 by KO, 1 by sub. So I'd look to hit it that way. That would be my angle. The reason I don't want to bet close at ITD is although I think he'll win with the pace, with the pressure, the volume, some takedowns mixed in, he is hittable, and we've seen with the Arman fight, like you mentioned, he does have power in his hand. He can connect. He does have a nasty guillotine on him as well if he wants to shoot a sloppy takedown closer. So yeah, I'm just staying away because I just think there's too much danger on the other side. And yeah, my official pick though would be close to finish. And also he's had some personal shit go on in his life. His baby was born, and I think there was like complications with his missus. So I don't know, maybe that gives him desire to provide for the family, perks him up a bit to, will to win the fight and whatnot. So yeah, he's got all the motivation to get the W, man. And Silva, he's just a bit mid. He's kind of a counter striker. On all the juice in the world, man. That physique never fucking changes. Looks like a bloody bodybuilder. Maybe a good angle would be close to win in the later rounds. Once he wears him down, we know Joaquin's going to be fresh early. Maybe that would be a way to go, man. But I don't think I want any part of this fight, to be honest.
Yeah, me either. And to your point, I thought there was some Narrative Nation, shout out to my guy George, but some Narrative Nation support behind Drakkar Klose because, not only is his missus having complications, as you say, but it's Courtney Casey, right? She's a UFC fighter. So it's like very close to the company. I think everybody, they're pretty well regarded, within the company. And they had that incident with Jeremy Stevens as well. They didn't sue, they're probably just let's take care of Drakkar Klose, give him some winnable fights. And I think about if they were trying to bust the All Brazil parlay, hey, here's one leg to get people to throw in there. He's got a nice name like Silva. Come on, put him in the parlay. See how it turns out for you. And I think that Drakkar Klose, not a very popular guy, not a super well-known guy, but he has been a pretty consistent guy in terms of the winning, right? He just goes out there and wins most of these fights. And if he had beaten Beneil Dariush, who knows where we would have been talking about Drakkar Klose and where he's at in his career right now. He's been struggling to get a ranked opponent. He's been asking for one for a long time. So let's see what happens in this next one. But we can move along, my man. We've got next up in the oh, goodness. I went too deep into a Tapology rabbit hole here. I could hardly get out of it. Next up, we got Gene Silva. Speaking of Silvas, taking on William Gomis, another fight that I watched tape for today. And I think that William Gomis is a classic weasel. It's an expression that a lot of people use in the MMA community. I don't use it very often, but that really has been what he's been doing in the UFC, point fighting. To a T. He's not looking for finishes. He's not looking to get anybody out of there. He's skirting backwards, moving outside along the octagon. He does use that front kick up the middle. He'll teep a little bit, throw some low kicks, maybe touch with a jab, circle off with a hook, but he's very infrequently throwing. He's not throwing often in combination. He's not really looking to extend or make it a fight. He's looking to mitigate damage, move around, make the other guy miss, make the other guy chase, touch, and then go. And that's not really the kind of fighting that I like to watch. I certainly don't think that's the kind of fighting that Dana White likes to watch. So this fight got put together because these guys are polar opposites, right? You got Gene Silva, who's like, I'm going to come forward and kill you, whether it kills me or not, right? He's like, I'm putting my hands at my sides. I'm not afraid of getting hit. I want to do damage. I want to hurt somebody. I'm trying to kill you. Way different fighters. And I just think that he's going to have nothing to respect about William Gomis. That's the one thing I haven't heard an argument from somebody this week about what Gomis does that's going to get respect from Gene Silva. I do think Silva's going to struggle to hit him, but is he going to stop coming forward? I don't think so. And I think eventually he's going to land because it's hard to fight going backwards for 15 minutes. And we've seen in all these fights, guys are having moments of success against Gomis. Jarno Aarons is a guy that really was pretty inexperienced coming into the UFC. And I thought that he had a winnable matchup against Gomis. I thought he could go out there and get that done. And what ended up happening is he had some moments of success, but his cardio kind of failed him there. And he didn't have the requisite skills in all positions to finish the fight when he had opportunities, right? He had a nice triangle armbar setup. He just didn't know what to do with it, right? And it was third round, guys getting a little bit greased up, a little bit slick. He's able to pull himself out of it. But I think about this fight and I say to myself, who do I expect to have more wrestling and grappling upside? Give me the guy from Fighting Nerds who's Brazilian, looks like he's bricked up and strong. He doesn't have that many submissions on his record. He's not going out there and showing that very often. But I think that Gomis has shown a real vulnerability to the grappling. I don't know that people remember the Francis Marshall fight that I rewatched today, where Francis Marshall takes him down, face down, hips down, and almost rear naked chokes the guy. And by the way, how's Francis Marshall been doing so far in the UFC? He's a purple belt of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's very inexperienced in his own right. I think he was undefeated 7-0. It's like, yeah, great record, but like, you know, he still had a ton to prove. And he was out there taking this guy down. I think it was like split decision territory. I have not been impressed by William Gomis. I think he's been skating by the skin of his teeth. And I think that I get it at plus money. People want to take a shot. Gene Silva's a little bit reckless, a little bit crazy. But honestly, I think that Gene Silva is going to win this fight. I think he might finish Gomis. And I think that the crowd's going to be behind him. I think that Gomis is going to be getting booed out of the building, you know, if he's skirting around the octagon the whole time. So, yeah, I just feel like Silva is going to press too much action, too dangerous. And I think he's going to get the win here. How about you, man?
Yeah, I like Gene Silva, man. Yeah, I put out 2 things each week. Mush of the week, prop of the week. Prop of the week is Gene Silva by submission. I put it out at 550. I got 800 at Unibet, but you can get 550, I think, at like Bet Online or whatever the fuck you Americans have got on your books. But 800, man, that was very juicy. So yeah, took it. And yeah, love the bet, man. Like you were saying, who the fuck is William Gomis? And he is a weasel, bro. I use that exact word on my podcast because that's the only way to describe him. These people who don't want to fight, they just want to burn the clock, lay in guard, do anything they can to get a W, and don't give a fuck whether they're entertaining us or not. One thing that I was going to mention about this fight is Gomis has just signed a new contract with the UFC. And in my opinion, I don't like that. It breeds short-term laziness. You know, you look at a guy like Nathaniel Wood, that's a good example against Nemov, just signed a new contract. And I just think it makes people comfortable. You know, they think, oh, right, I'm signed up here. The UFC loves me. I've got 4 fights. You know, even if I was to lose this one, they're not going to fucking cut me, which is true. It's facts. So, yeah, I don't like it when they just signed a new contract, you know, when they're mid-fighters anyway, when they're nobodies like Gomis. In his last fight, when he won by TKO in France, that was some bullshit. I don't know what the ref was doing. You know, he's going to split with Gennaro Aarons, split with...
I had Gamori money line.
Francis Marshall. Yeah, I had Gamori, or whatever the fuck you call him. I bet him as well, just because. Yeah, Francis Marshall, you know what I mean? You're losing to that guy. That guy is shit, man. Shout out to Bulgarian for fucking breaking his face. Gene Silva by submission.
Wow, Gomis is. I'm seeing minus 115 on Gene Silva now. I'm surprised by that, Rich.
I'm not surprised. You know why? Because MMA Twitter's a bunch of fucking nerds, man. They're all betting Gomis. I've seen it all day, man. 2 units here, 3 units there. Just because he's a bit bigger, they think they've got an angle based on nothing. I don't see anyone backing it up with any like pertinent facts. They're just literally putting a couple of units on Gomis because he's a dog. They think he's the dog that's going to cash on the card. He's not. He's going to get subbed. If you want the dogs, just continue listening, man. We'll give you some dogs in a bit, but it ain't Gomis, man. He's a bitch. He's going to get subbed. Clip that too.
Yeah, you know, Rich, it's so funny because I was putting together, I make every week an idea board, right? Which is like my way of just like getting my thoughts out on paper and like before I go into some of the tape or before I go into my market analysis, I try and like figure out, all right, these are some of the things I want to look at because there's a million options every week, right? Like if you look through every fight, there's 36, 40, 50 props. So I'm like, all right, let me just get some things down on paper. And sometimes I pick the wrong ones, right? But normally there's a lot of value on the list by the end of the week because I have a decent mind for the game. I've done this a long time. And my man, it's so funny because I had only gotten to do like 3 lines of my list, right? Like I go fight by fight. I'd only gotten 3 lines of the list, so I didn't even send it anywhere yet. But right now on my phone, I have Gene Silva money line, Gene Silva sub plus 800. So take that for whatever it's worth. Both of us had our eyes on that. And it's based on the tape study. I see William Gomis as a very suspect grappler. So that's the way that I see it.
One difference though, Liam. Fuck writing it down. Go bet the fucker.
Oh, by the way, I just did because I didn't want it to move based on our show while we were talking about it. So shout out to you. And I sent it to the Patreon as well saying, Rich just mentioned it on the show. I'm worried it will move. Go bet it now. There you go. But in any case, next up, my man, we got Elves Brenner taking on Miktebek Oralbai. And Miktabek Orobai is my boy for life, right? Because last time out, he went out there and not only cashed me the ticket, but he vindicated the prediction because I had him by sub in round 1 or 2. Rear naked choke was the prediction, and he just went out there and delivered. But the difference, I think, between that matchup and this, I can't remember who started last, Rich. Was it me or you? Because if you'd like, you're more than welcome to start this one off. But I do have a lot to say here. So, yeah, man, I researched this fight, and I'm a big Orobai fan. I think he's a great fighter. I think he's really good everywhere, right? Like on the feet, he can strike, he can get hit and not react like a, scaredy, right? Like he's willing to get in the pocket and fight. He's a warrior. But I do just think the same is true about Alex Brenner, right? Like if you look at Alex Brenner, man, this guy has surprised me a couple times in the UFC. And I don't like to get surprised, Rich. I like to be good on underdog calls. But I just thought, like, man, Guram Kutateladze, a little overrated, but I was like, man, he should have the skills to take this guy to the ground. We did see that. He took him to the ground. He should have the skills to land huge shots. He landed massive shots. The guy almost got knocked out in the first round, right? He was bloodied up badly. But Alex Brenner is like a cat. He's just got 9 fucking lives every fight. He goes out there, he gets hit big, he keeps fighting. He gets taken down, he keeps fighting. And he just seems like a dog, man. And when you talk about these guys that you don't want to fight, Diego Lopes, why don't you want to fight him? There's nowhere safe. There's nowhere I could just feel comfortable. There's nowhere I could dominate the fight. And that's where I've felt Brenner has done a really good job. Like he's prolific to the submission prior to getting to the UFC, right? Like before he was in the UFC, everything was sub. And since he's gotten to the UFC, it's been blood and guts wars. Stand in the pocket, trade, land huge shots, knock people out. That's Dana White's favorite fighter. I hate to tell you, like if you're going to stand in the pocket, trade, not go down when you get hit, and make it wars, like this guy kind of checks a lot of boxes for the promotion. They like these kind of guys. Now, on the other side, Orobai, he is a guy that needs to win fights to get somewhere in the UFC, right? They're not going to try and push you up the card, shoot you to the top of the moon if you're out there wrestling and grappling. But why'd they sign him? Why'd they sign him with preference in that Medic fight? Why'd they lie to Uros Medic and say, this guy's mostly a striker? They literally said that to him because he went out there and grabbed the guy by the back of the head, punched him with an uppercut, sent his hair flying and knocked him dead. That's what Orobai can do at his best. But now we're talking about stepping up into the UFC where Brenner has been nothing but productive, right? Zubair Tuhugov's a tough out. He gets to win there. That was an impressive fight. I scored it for Brenner. I went back and rescored it, right? I watched it back. I was like, man, that's at 29-28 for Brenner. It's a close fight. It was a good fight, but he showed that this guy's tough in all positions. You want to wrestle? He can wrestle. You want to grapple? He can grapple. You want to strike? He can strike. So I think that Orobai I would favor to win this fight, but I would make it like a -150. Last time out, I was convinced that Orobai should be 65%, 70% against Uros Medic, and I got -140, so I had to take it. I was like, I'm getting huge value here. I think he should be a bigger favorite, and I think he showed that. He took a couple big shots from Uros Medic that my guy Tim Means was not able to take, right? But we've seen other guys go out there, and Uros Medic, his grappling is a deficiency. We know that about him. Tim Means wasn't able to expose that, but Orobai was able to expose that. Jalen Turner took him down. He didn't club and sub him like he did a lot of opponents. He took him down past his guard and exposed him on the mat. So I think about it like, man, Orobai's done everything right so far. But now there's a lot of expectations being placed on him. And it's not like the LFA. It's not like a fight in the Apex against Uros Medic where he could go out there and take him down at will. Now he's got to go out there against a guy who you're taking him down into a dangerous guard. You're going to be in a wild, scrambly affair. And this guy has shown he could fight hard for 15 minutes like an absolute wild man. So I think that Orobai, like I said, deserved favorite. If you said, who do you think is going to win? I think Orobai's the better fighter. I think he should win. But I said that about a couple of Brenner opponents. And this guy just is a dog. He's willing to fight very hard. And he's 2-0 as an underdog for a 500% ROI. Did you hear what I'm saying? The guy has just been fucking money. So, yeah, it's hard to stand in front of a guy like that, especially when you're being asked to lay $3 for the privilege, $2.50 for the privilege. That's a big ask. And I do think Orobai's good. And I think that, maybe if he wins this fight, then the line is -400 Orobai, the next X amount of fights that he has, and you miss the boat. Fair play. But for me, this is just not one where I want to get out over my skis and say, hey, because you cashed me last time, I'm going to follow you this time. I do think Orobai has a great future in the UFC, but I think the same is true of Brenner. Based on everything we've seen so far, this kid's not an easy out for anybody in the lightweight division. So, I think that probably a money line dogger pass situation. I think somebody's probably getting violently finished here based on the style of fight. But I don't even feel bullish on a total because both these guys are tougher than an old leather boot. So, fuck it. How do you feel, Rich?
I think Orobai wins. I don't know about betting his money line. It's up to you if that's your thing, but I think he wins the fight. So there's that. He's down to 155 now. Obviously, he took the medic fight on short notice, upper weight class, down to 155. I think that matters. I think he's really 13-0, not 12-1. Again, like I mentioned earlier with that Anesta chick, if you go on YouTube and you watch his one loss against that Russian guy, it was a clear corruption in Russia, man. Orobai had his way with him, took him down repeatedly, did his thing. And even the Russian couldn't believe that they raised his hand at the end of it. So this guy is 13-0. I think he's tough as nails. Unlike other people on this card, I don't think the occasion's going to get to him. He's a fucking caveman. I think he's just going to beast over Brenner, takedowns at will. I don't think he's going to gas. Likely a decision. The only finish I can see in this fight would be Orobai by TKO. An accumulation of strikes on the ground. Maybe the ref stops him. We get Mark Smith, fight back, fight back. But yeah, Orobai all day, man. Decision, maybe a late finish by TKO.
Yeah, I think I've seen both these guys on the tape get hurt and rocked, so I could see a finish. But to your point, Orobai kind of takes the path of least resistance. He has an excellent top control game. He's got an excellent writing, series, wrestling. So I could see him getting on top, making this an uncomfortable fight, holding on to Brenner. But I just feel like, we saw Uros Medic work his way back up to his feet a couple of times. And obviously it's at 170 pounds. It's on short notice. Some certain factors to consider. But yeah. I think that, both of these guys are live by finish, honestly, because I think that Orobai, his submissions are not from being fucking Johnny Jiu-Jitsu, right? His submissions are from being on top of you, breaking your face, putting you into the ground, breaking your will and your spirit, and then submitting you, right? That's kind of what he does. I don't think Brenner is going to break. I just don't see it happening at a very high clip. I think the way you take him out is to knock him out, because he has been hurt very badly in some of these fights, including against Guram. He was wobbling in the first round after he got that gash on his eyebrow. But the other thing I'll say is Orobai has taken clean shots in these fights and shown a good chin. But Brenner, he hits very weird shots. A lot of what he's throwing hooks, combination, elbow up the middle. It's just a very weird offensive attack. And so I think a lot of randomness could happen in this fight where both of them are just landing huge shots. So to your point, Orobai is live to win by knockout because it's 155 pounds. We've seen Brenner on the ropes before. Both these guys throw huge shots and have power. But on the other side too, I think Orobai, a lot of his fights, he's very comfortable with the fact that if this gets sideways on the feet, I'm going to shoot a takedown. This guy's going to the ground right now. And I do think in this fight, it's going to be harder to do that to Brenner. So that's what makes it interesting for me. But fantastic, fantastic fight. This is one of the fights I'm most excited for on the card, because I think that if you ask me 5 years from now, who's going to be relevant still in the division, I think both these guys could still be around, because I think they both have skills to win many more UFC fights, but they're putting them together early to find out where they're at right now. And for me, that's a fun scrap. But how can you count out this guy Brenner, man? He's fucking unbelievable underdog so far. Great fight. Next up, my man, we got Karolina Kowalkiewicz taking on Yasmin Lucindo. I just want to bring in the odds over from our friends at Fight Numbers. I'm referring to the live odds board right now. This is up to date even while the fights are going on, so you can get live numbers as you're betting on these fights. But right now, the best available money line price on Karolina Kowalkiewicz, the underdog, plus 340, Rich, over on Bet Rivers. And we're looking at minus 400 on Bet365 for the favorite, Yasmin Lucindo. I see that smirk on your face. I know you got something to say here. What do you think about this one, Rich?
Yeah, me and Clint are besties now, but still, I so wanted to bet KK just because he's whacked 7 units on Lucindo, which I think is nuts. It's a bit OTT. But I couldn't get there, man. I'm not betting Lucindo. I can understand why people would. I do think she is maybe live for a knockout. She hits hard. Karolina, KK, she doesn't wear damage well at all. She always looks bruised up. It looks like she's on vacation. I've been watching her Instagram this week, and it, just looks like she's on vacation, man, to be honest. She's had a resurgence in her career. Big whoop. It was against Herrig, Juarez, Vanessa, and Belbita. Big deal. And Lucindo, man, there's just some question marks. She's only 22, super young. I see she's training with Amanda Nunes now. Maybe that's something she can learn a thing or two. Is down to 115 again. She's a bit podgy in the middle section, Lucindo. So we'll see how she looks at face-offs and weigh-ins. But I just don't think she's anything to write home about herself, man. Not where I'd have the confidence in laying some money on her in this spot. She loses the decision to Yasmin. You could take something out of that, I suppose, but Yasmin couldn't even finish Sam Hughes. So how much credit do you want to give Lucindo for that one? And then, she beats Polly. That submission, I went back and watched it, was just ridiculous. Polly, she taps so quick, man. So it doesn't really tell me much. It doesn't really, let me gauge where Lucindo's at. But I do know where KK is at. And, she's one fight away from retirement. This definitely could be it. So I'm staying away, but there's just a few factors that have scared me away from, betting Lucindo. So yeah, it's a complete pass from me, man.
Yeah, I've been high on Lucindo since the Waregi fight, and I think that I had to, adjust that down just a little bit because I cashed a big bet on Waregi there, but it was a little sweatier than I expected, right? And now we've seen why, right? Waregi is just a little bit disconcerting with her visuals. She gets hit cleanly on the feet, sometimes gets rocked, gets wobbled, can wear some damage, and got finished via knockout, within like a minute, which is like very rare for women's strawweight. So I think there's some real concerns there, but I also think part of that was Lucindo landing a lot of damage on her the fight before. She had a pretty scrappy fight, and looking at Lucindo, she's young, very young in the game. She's been fighting for a long time, so a lot of professional experience for a young girl. And I think that on the other side, Kovacevic could give her that vet lesson. That's her path here, just being a little more savvy, having a little bit more positional awareness. But honestly, Polyana Viana is a dangerous girl. Like against most opponents, she can go out there, land some big shots with her hands. She has like above average size hands for the division. She's got multiple wins by knockout, prior to the UFC, in the UFC, knocked out Jinh Frey, I think, with one punch. So we know that Polyana Viana has some power in her hands, and she's got some Brazilian jiu-jitsu, right? She submitted some girls. She's had a dangerous guard game. And when she went out there in that fight, Lucindo was able to beat her on the ground, which I did think was a little bit of a feather in her cap there. I said she's made marked improvements on the ground. I thought Waregi would have her way with her on the mat. I thought that was like the ace in her sleeve, right? Like I could go out there, compete with her on the feet, but if I need it, I got these takedowns in my back pocket. Instead, it was a little bit more competitive in the grappling. And now Lucindo is showing she's making advancements. I believe Polyana is a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. She was able to submit her. I don't know what her rank is, but I would assume that she's, commensurate level, brown belt type of level Jiu-Jitsu. And so if that's the case, like I think that Lucindo, more powerful on the feet, more durable, going to be able to take better shots. So I think Dixon makes a good point. If you like the KK side, she's probably got to win a decision here. I don't see her having much finishing equity, but I think that, for the Lucindo side, a lot of her value in this fight, if she was to go out there and get another decision, I don't think it does much for her. I don't think that people really regard Carolina as a top girl in the division these days. But I think if you go out there, you get a stoppage, you get an emphatic win, I think that pushes her career in the right direction. So, interesting. Kendra says, I think Polly is a purple belt. I'll check that, but I don't think that that's true. But in
Polly's,
any case, I could be wrong.
Polly's a black belt until she gets hit, and then she's a fucking blue belt, man.
Yeah, that is definitely the truth. 1 million Instagram followers for the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu brown belt. She's a brown belt, dog. Don't you sleep on me. But no, I was wrong too. So in any case, we can move to the next fight here where we've got, let's see. I'm again deep in the Tapology wormhole.
Brito.
Next up is Brito. Oh, my man. So long gone are the days, Rich, where we're getting, plus 250 on Joe Anderson Brito against Andre Touchy Feely. But in this spot, like, I think that Brito is the side, right? And the reason I say that is pretty straightforward. I think he's strong. I think he's physical. I think that he's skilled in the grappling, and I think he's got big power in the hands. And I was not blown away by the fight that Jack Shore just put out in his featherweight debut against Makwan Amirkhani. He was getting taken down in that spot. He was getting put on the ground. He was getting out-muscled and out-hustled in some of those positions in round one. And Makwan Amirkhani, classic cigarette cardio, as I always talk about. You know, he goes out there, he puts on a good showing in the first round. By round two, my man's like, yo, give me the check. I'm done with all this shit. And he was ready to go. And so Jack Shore goes out there and gets the win. And I'll say these positives about Jack Shore. I think his kicks are all right. You know, he throws head kicks. He can kind of mix it up. His offense can show some variety at times. He's got length, so he can be awkward. He can throw some knees up the middle, some kicks up the middle. And, you know, he's not a terrible boxer. He's been working on his boxing, trying to improve that set of skills. But I think Brito could just take a good shot. You know, I think he's a pretty strong-willed guy. I think he's got a pretty solid chin. And I think that if that's the case, you know, Jack Shore, I think, can get hurt to the body. I think he can get hurt upstairs. He got rocked by Ricky Simone, who's got some power in his hands, but he's a 135er. He's not known for being the heaviest-handed guy. And so I think of Ricky, that fight being a little bit telling. You know, he was getting bullied around in the wrestling at points. He was getting muscled around. I think that Jack is very technical. You know, I think he does a lot of things right. I think he's the more skilled guy between the two of these guys. But I don't know that any of it's going to matter because I think Brito could take a better shot. I think he could give a better shot. I think he's more physical in the wrestling and the grappling. I think for sure his advantage might be the cardio. But the one thing I will say is when you're a guy that doesn't have the same kind of musculature, right? When you're a guy like Jack Shore, who I think he's probably getting some advantage from not cutting weight, but he's also giving some up by looking like he's got a little bit of a soft belly. You said that about Lucindo. I think the same thing's true about Jack Shore, but often we see it pay dividends in the men's side of the game. And Brito, Jonathan Pierce said that the guy's built like solid metal. Shout out to Santino DeFranco and them. I listened to their show. But Jonathan Pierce had said that about Brito. Like, he was like, man, this guy doesn't feel like a normal human being. Like, he just feels like he's made of like a different material. And that's what it looks like on television as well. You know, Brito was like one of the biggest favorites in UFC history when he fought Weston Wilson. He's like minus 1,400. They give him these spots where, hey, go out there and look good. And the fight that he lost, I bet him against Bill Algeo. And I thought that that was a spot where he learned a lesson, which is I don't have to go out there and proactively wrestle and grapple everybody. You know, I think we saw that against Diego Lopes. He can go out there and proactively wrestle and grapple guys and do really well as long as he can get them to play guard. But Bill Algeo refuses to play guard. He just made it so it was like, you have to keep Matt returning me, Matt returning me, Matt returning me. That's an exhausting game to play no matter who you are. And so I think that for Brito, that's a lesson learned. If they were to rematch today, I'd take Brito by KO in the first round. And I think that when I'm looking at how he's performed recently, even if he faces adversity, even when he's down on the scorecards, he's still talking shit. He's still confident and he could still finish. So I think Joe Anderson Brito, from some point from round 1 till round 3, he's going to find an opportunity to finish. And I think he's going to put Jack Shore away. How do you feel about this one, Rich?
We got a disagreement, man. I like Jack Shore. But I'm not going to play him pre-fight. I'm going to wait until he loses round 1. Yeah, I like Shore in this one, man. I don't think that JSP win aged well. Yeah, it was a fluke meme sub. Well done. You got the W, all good. But prior to that, man, to have Pierce, who we just seen against Onama, he's not the greatest wrestler, man. It just depends on the opponent, I think. You know, when he fought C-Rod Pierce, it was because C-Rod was going for submissions, you know, which put him on his back. So him being able to wrestle fuck Brito is worrisome for me if you like Brito. You know, he's supposed to be this strong, scary guy, like you just alluded to, what Franco was saying or whatever. But yeah, I don't think he's all that, man. I think he's a bit of a mental midget. We've seen it with Diego Lopes. You know, he was able to control him. But like you said, Lopez, he likes to play guard. So he was happy on his back looking for submissions. I don't think Shore's going to do that. I think, if anything, if Brito wants to employ, you know, that wrestling game like he did against Diego, he's going to find that it's going to deplete him more than it is Shore. So yeah, I'm going to look to hit Shore live after round 1. I don't care how round 1 goes, even if he gets 10-8'd, because, you know, Brito's on top fucking him up and smothering him. I think that's just going to be more detrimental to him. I don't think he's got the cardio, you know, and that was the reason why I was heavy on Algeo. Granted, I bet the finish as well for Algeo in 2 and 3. But I'm the same here, man. I like Shore. I don't mind the late finishes purely because I just think Brito's a bit of a spastic, man. Like, everywhere on the feet, he throws things with ill intentions, but it's not technical at all. He's just looking to take your head off and use his power and his steroids. When that doesn't work, he'll level change and try and get a submission through sheer force. There's nothing technical about anything that he does, in my opinion. So I like Shaw to weather the storm, and then round 2, 3, put it on him, negate the takedowns, fight back, reverse position, and likely get a decision. That's how I think it'll go. But maybe he gets a late finish, man. But I like Shaw in this one, man. And yeah, he is soft in the body. I noticed that too, man. Real soft.
Yeah, and it's funny, Rich, because he's had great results at 145. If you look at his career, I think he's 8-0 career at 145 pounds. If I'm wrong, it's 7-0. Then he went down to 135, came to the UFC, rattled off some good results, got finished, and then he went up, found a new weight class. And he looked all right against Makwan. But like I said, the look against Makwan, I think Makwan falls off a cliff. I think Brito slowly jogs off a cliff, like very late in the fight. So for me, I think he's going to do enough early in the fight to win a close decision if it gets there. But I did think the line movement has been a little bit weird. I knew that there was going to be some sharps on the Jack Shore side. He was regarded as a great prospect before that loss against Ricky Simone. I do think that one took a lot of people by surprise as well. So now let's see how it turns out for Jack Shore. I think this is the first time he's been an underdog in the UFC. So let's see how it turns out.
Yeah. And
Anderson, please go ahead.
Yeah, just to close, man, because obviously there's people in the comments who don't like my take. I'm not betting with my heart. I'm not a hater of Brito at all. I'm looking and watching the tape and I'm making an objective take based on that, an opinion. I couldn't give a fuck about either of these people. Don't know them, couldn't give a fuck. But you're asking me to break down the fight. That's what I see. You're not going to get any confirmation bias here. And if you're coming in to watch a podcast already thinking Brito's the shit, then what you doing here, man? You're here for our opinions. I don't think I've said anything out of line in terms of the matchup, how things are going to go. Everything was factual. So, it's an educated pick, man. There's no emotions involved at all. And I'm not even.
I think there's a case to be made for both fighters, right? Like the case for Jack Shore is he's never lost as a featherweight. Maybe his chin's a little bit better in this division. Maybe his cardio is a little bit better. Also, he does look stylistically like a similar archetype to Bill Algeo, the only guy to beat Brito in the UFC. But the things I would push back on and just say like the case for Brito, right? If I strongman the case for Jack Shore, it's that he's undefeated, all those things. If I strawman the case or steelman, the case for Brito, it's that he's beaten Andre Fili, Jonathan Pierce, Diego Lopes, and Chepe Mariscal, which there isn't a name I would argue on the record of Shore that looks that good, but I would say Valiev is a good win, and he almost knocked him out. He did hurt him very badly in that fight. So Jack Shore has done good work, but I'd say most of it has been a little bit like one echelon below in the UFC, the guys he's been fighting and beating. And I think that Brito, some of his wins have aged well, right? You pointed to the Pierce one as maybe not aging that great. Onama, I think, is a freak athlete. I kind of thought Onama was going to do exactly what he did, which is just muscle his way out of grappling and then beat him. And Brito did the same thing, right? And I just worry that Jack Shore is going to try and have like, hey, I'm going to be better at grappling. I'm going to use my techniques. And it's just not going to work because the guy is just a fucking hoss. But I do think Jack Shore is more skilled. So, shout out to you, always stick by your reads, stick by your takes, fuck it all. Rather, be wrong on my own read than, follow somebody else off a cliff. Right. So, shout out to you there. I've just been a fan of Brito for a long time. I did watch the tape on Jack Shore because I wanted to make sure I wasn't being biased, but I do feel like I saw a couple of things on the Jack Shore tape that make me think he's not out over his head. Like he doesn't have no chance here, but I do think eventually he's going to capitulate because I just think Brito's a freak. But next up, also, I will say this, the last thing I got to say about the marketability of Brito, he took his pants off, bro, and started marching around the octagon, doing the Yoel Romero salutes and shit. I was like, this guy is a future star. Whether he wins or loses this fight, this guy just has the right kind of attitude and, gumption about him. He's just must-see television, I feel. But next up, we got Paul, the Banter Jew, Craig, looking to make a statement here. He's back in the middleweight division, and he's taking on Caio Borralho. I've heard a lot of Bohayos. I've heard a lot of Borrahios. I've heard a lot of different ways to pronounce it this week, but I'm sticking with Caio Borralho. And he's been nothing but a producer so far in the UFC, Rich. I think 5-0 as a favorite. Done a great job on the Contender Series as well. Took him 2 tries out, but the second time he knocked out James Murray, got the finish there. And the fight prior, he had beaten Aaron Jeffrey, a guy who's gone on to have a pretty serious professional career in his own right. So fascinating matchup. We'll kick it over to you first, Rich. How do you feel about this one? Kicking off our main card of the evening, Paul the Berju Craig or Caio Borralho for you?
Yeah, man, you've got that Scottish accent down to a T, bro. I like Borralho. I go with Borralho. I like him, man. He's been a bit underwhelming, though. I bet on him to win by submission in a few fights, and he's let me down. He's clearly had an advantage in these bouts as well, where he could have finished. I've been screaming at the TV, man. Fucking push, motherfucker. Sink in the choke, but yeah, he's been super underwhelming. In this fight, I think he wins, man. I think Craig going down to 185 was a desperation move. He has had tough matchups throughout his career, man. And obviously he's exceeded expectations, maybe even overachieved earlier in his career. But just lately, man, I think this drop to 185 is pure desperation to stay in the UFC and, maybe be a bit of a weight bully, because he's a big fucker. I'm sure he's like 6'3". So he's a big fucker. But Borralho, man, I like his game. I think he's got solid jiu-jitsu. He's faced Jailton Almeida in jiu-jitsu competitions. We all know about him. He didn't win them, but he didn't get subbed either. I like his footwork. I think if he was more aggressive, he could probably get more finishes on the feet. I think he's got a nice left hand. I do like his movement. And I think this fight's tailor-made, man. If he doesn't get a finish in this one, I'm not going to write him off completely, but the stock that I have on him is going to be much lower, man, because I've just been burnt too many times. Like you said, he's like 5-0 in the UFC, and the only person he finished was Lord Michael by sub. And that's nothing to write home about. Everybody's subbing that fucker these days. I like Borralho. I like the KO, but I'm reluctant to take it because of previous fights. I think after round 1, Craig's going to be pulling guard. Hopefully, we see some IQ for Borralho. He keeps it on the feet, tells the ref to make him stand back up. And he tags him standing, man, because that's where he's got a clear edge. It's in Brazil. You're 5-0. Make a statement. If you want to go up to that next level and be a contender and start calling your shot, man, you've got to start finishing fights. So hopefully this guy's got some, emphasis on finishing this time, but we'll see about that.
Absolutely. I think that this is a spot where, Caio Borralho, he's another guy that I've really enjoyed his work over time in the UFC. Is he a guy that you love in terms of like going out there and finishing fights? Maybe not, but he just fights to his strengths. He knows where he's good. He takes people's back. He tries to control them from there. He tries to mitigate damage. He fights like a nerd. He hides nothing with his advertisement, right? And I think that when you look at a guy, on the other side here, like Paul Craig is kind of built for, surprising people, winning by impressive finishes. And he's beaten good jiu-jitsu guys, right? Andre Sergipano Muniz, impressive win when he first arrived in the middleweight division. But then you saw somebody who was a little bit younger, somebody who could keep a little bit of a higher pace, like a Brendan Allen, was able to kind of abuse him on the mat. Take him down, pass his guard, and really get to some good positions, beat him up with huge shots on the mat. And I think that unfortunately for Paul, that's a danger here as well. I think that Caio could take him down and pass his guard. And I think that for Paul Craig, he's got the build for being a really good guard player. But I think he went from being arguably the best guard player or like top 2 guard players in the light heavyweight division to just being a very good grappler in the middleweight division. I don't think he's one of the best. I think the middleweight division has more grapplers. So to your point, Rich, it's kind of like I'm getting knocked out by all these light heavyweights, but my main key advantage is that I'm way better at jiu-jitsu and all these guys stink. They're slow and they're awkward and they're stiff. And at middleweight, that's just not as true. And Caio Borralho is also a guy we've seen he can compete at 205. He's not a small guy. He's not a weak guy. He's strong and physical as well. So I just think this is a tough matchup for Paul Craig. I think that for Paul, he says, I want to knock this guy out. Both these guys are saying, I'm going to knock this guy out. So, you got 2 grapplers want to go out there and throw hands with each other. That does invite some volatility. I think Paul is just not, very fast. I think that's always been something that holds him back. He's kind of awkward. He's not like a traditional athlete. And I just think that Kaio's probably going to get off on the shots a little bit cleaner, but I don't like betting against Paul Craig at these huge numbers. I will say, I like most of the time in his career, Rich, you've been betting Paul Craig money line at like plus 200, plus 170, plus 155. And it's been his sub prop that's been plus 350, plus 200, plus 290, that kind of deal. So it is just interesting to see his money line all the way out there. But I think it relates to the fact they don't expect him to sub Barajo. And if he's not subbing him, it's going to be hard for him to win this fight. So next up, we've got Michel Pereira taking on Ihor Potieria. And this is one where we could take a victory lap as a show. Unfortunately, I'm an idiot, so I didn't bet this, but we did talk about it. You guys can go back and check the receipts. I even said, I think the first words out of my mouth were, Rich, I think the best bet to make on this fight, if I had to make one, was, Pereira to win the fight by sub, because he was taking on Lord Michal, and he had a terrible training camp, and we knew all these things coming in. Michal gets hit by one punch and submitted 30 seconds later. Unbelievable. Just left some money on the table there. I was really disappointed. But in any case, we called the right outcome there. We'll kick this one over to you. How do you feel about this matchup? Ihor Potieria stepping in after finally getting a win, breaking his way in. He's now in this middleweight division. And Michel Pereira on the other side, he was fighting at 170. He's now up at 185. How do you feel about this matchup in the middleweight division?
Yeah, I've stopped giving myself a pat on the back for previous fights, man. Somebody in the comments not too long ago called me out on it, and I looked back and I did do it a bit too often. But in this bout, I do have to mention, I had the sub against Lord Michael, and I had the KO against Petrosky. This time I've got Ihor by KO. I'm jumping off the Michel bandwagon just because of the matchup, man, and the intangibles that surround it. Is Ihor even going to make weight? He didn't last time. He was a couple of pounds over. This is relatively short notice for him. So, I'm very interested to see if he makes weight. But aside from that, I think that there's a big discrepancy in the weight, in the metrics. Ihor 6'3". He's certainly bigger than anybody that Michel has fought anytime recently. I checked it out, at least his last 3 or 4 fights. So I don't think Ihor is particularly that skilled, but he carries power in his hands. He's willing to throw down. And aside from getting sparked by that Aussie, he's shown a pretty good chin, man. So I'm going to bet him here by KO specifically. I'm not going to touch the money line. I got the KO at plus 800. So I took some of that. And I just don't see how Michel is going to have an advantage here. What he's going to do, he can be high off his recent wins, come out here thinking he's the shit now, be overconfident, and he's just going to get countered and sparked. He can implement the takedowns, but I think Ihor's too big, too fresh at the start of the fight, and he's going to negate him. And then if he wants to play a fucking, a striking battle with Ihor, he needs to watch his fucking watch himself, man, because he could easily get TKO'd. I was deliberating for fucking ages between this bout and the Petrino and Smith one for the main card parlay buster. And ultimately, obviously, I've landed on this one. I think Petrino beat Smith. But it was just because of the metrics. There was more red flags on the Michel side. So, I'm taking Ihor. That's the short of it. I think he gets a KO. Have I got anything else? No, that's it for my notes, man. Ihor by KO.
I love it. Going to just do a quick shout to fight numbers, guys, as I give you the up-to-date numbers, right? So right now, we're sitting at the best available price on Michel Pereira, minus 600 at Bet365. So heavy chalk on the Pereira side. Ihor Potieria on the other side, coming back at plus 500 via Bet Online. So obviously a huge discrepancy between these two. And I would say there's a few different things that I want to point out about this fight right off the rip, right? First and foremost, Michel Pereira, most of the best work he's done throughout his career has been at 170 pounds. He's looked great in his first 2 starts at 185, but let's contextualize, right? His starts at 185 were against whom, right? He took on Petrosky, right? And Rich cashed the KO ticket there, but Petrosky just got KO'd by the hip of Jacob Malkoun. So we got to be a little bit cognizant of that fact, right? Then we talk about Michal Oleksiejczuk. What has been his career liability? his lack of ground game, right? He's always been terrible there, but he also gets hit, cracked, rocked all the time in his fights. And we saw that just one fight ago against Njokuani. He took a ton of damage, but he landed more and he got the finish. But we know that Michal just has no ground game. So he got hurt and then he got taken to the ground. He got finished instantly. And when I'm looking at this spot, I say to myself, okay, Ihor Potieria has done basically what's been expected of him, right? Because he's been an underdog in all these fights. Nobody expects him to do jack shit. And he goes out there, he wins 2 out of 5. So he's going out there, winning some fights, losing some fights, but most of them were at light heavyweight, right? Against guys that you'd expect would be favored against Michel Pereira. And so I look at this and I say, okay, you've got a interesting spot here because Pereira, he's lost a fight in the UFC to a 145 pounder, right? And like, any way you want to slice that, you want to make excuses for him. Okay. It's just like, that's a bad look. Then you look at the other fights he's had. He's gone 29-28 with middling 170 pounders. Prior to the UFC, he's been knocked out by Dusko Todorovic, who can't buy a win in the organization. It's like, we got to start putting some red flags around. How good is this guy really at middleweight? I don't know. That's still an unknown. And I think that on the other side here for Potieria, how good is he at middleweight? That's an unknown. Pushes the line closer to 50-50, not minus 600, right? And when you look at the other thing about Pereira, minus 150, minus 170, minus 200. That's kind of been the range, you know? When you look through his run, he hasn't been a big favorite very often in the UFC. He's been a small favorite because people don't like the antics. They don't like the bullshit. But when you got a guy with a disqualification loss and a loss to a featherweight, those are not the same fight. It's like, okay, the guy clearly can make boneheaded decisions. He's looked a little bit more mature in these last 2 outings, but we also can contextualize them and then say, this guy could have been fighting for a title at 170 if he wasn't such a bonehead, missed weight against Wonder Boy in a winnable fight, and then now has to go rebuild from scratch at 185. He's not a young man in the game. He's still got, a lot of miles on him fighting and otherwise. So I think that was a real setback for his career. He's got some wins and some momentum, but to your point, he's a cocky asshole. He comes out there doing the dances and everything. He's a fun enough guy. You like to see him do well, but at minus 600, I just think it's insane based on what we know about the guy. He is a bag fumbler historically. He's gone out there and cost people money before. And, again, a different referee in the Nico Price fight, when he does the spinning backflip, kicks him in the head, he gets disqualified and the fight is over. So it just seems to me like, people are putting a lot of faith in Pereira based on recent results. And I think the long-term perspective tells you he's a guy who's very capable of burning you. And on the other side, Potieria, he's a guy that's going to go out there and fight hard for your money. Even against Bellato, a fight that he lost, he had Bellato on the ropes, nearly finished him. And that's a guy at 205.
Bellato's
yeah, exactly.
good, man.
Bellato almost finished Petrino, who we're going to talk about shortly, right? Like,
and another thing I got to mention as well, those who don't know, I run a Discord group, man, for my Patreon. So we're always chatting when the fights are on. When fucking Michel fought Lord Michael and Michel was coming to the cage and I seen the fucking lights go down and him start doing his Michael Jackson dancing, I was like, fuck you, man. Is this guy not learned from his mistakes? If he comes out here doing backflips, I'm going to kill myself. Luckily, he got the submission quick, so I forgive him. But he's still got that retardness in him, man. I can see him coming out against Ihor. It's in Brazil. He wants to put on a show, doing the Johnny Walker dance, taking his top off, doing... Who's that bitch, man? That girl who fought the black girl and lost. She was like a minus 800 favorite, the Russian chick. Someone knows.
Goodness gracious, I know who you're talking about. Agapova?
Agapova. He was doing the Agapova. If he comes out, man, he's still got it in him. You never know what you're going to get from Michel. So to have him minus 400, minus 500, he comes out doing the Agapova and he's gassing before he even gets into the cage. You never know, man. So laying this kind of chalk on him isn't advisable.
Totally agree. I don't think you could trust him with your money like that. And also, I think Ihor is much better suited for middleweight. Just like looking at Ihor and how he presents his game at 205, too many guys are going to be too strong and just muscle him to the ground. I think he's got a big body. He's got length. He's got some attributes. So
please miss weight, Ihor. Please miss weight.
Also, Alex Savoy says Ihor KO'd Shogun in Rio. That's true. He's gone to Rio and played spoiler to the home crowd before. Shout out to Pepe. He says, let's go Ihor. I took the under. And shout out to Dixon as well. He's liking the over. He's liking a controversial over here. So
no chance.
Let's see how it goes. But yeah, we always love the crowd. A lot of different sharp takes in all different directions. But Next up, my man, the other potential mush of the week from Rich. This is Vitor Petrino taking on Anthony Smith. If you had asked me pre-tape, is there any chance really that Anthony Smith wins? I'd be like, yeah, I mean, there's certainly a point of value at some point, but like, I just don't see it. And watching back the tape, man, Vitor Petrino is an accident waiting to happen. I do think he's a good fighter. And when he came to the UFC, he was better than people gave him credit for. But now it's getting to the point of role reversal, right? Where now he is clearly, to me, overrated. I do think Anthony Smith is washed. I think that it's probably going to be an opportunity, unfortunately, where Anthony Smith is not the guy. So I think, the right side is Anthony Smith and he's going to lose anyway. But when you look, Petrino does a few things well, which is that he's very strong. And when he's in a bad spot, he changes the phase of the fight, right? If he's getting beat up on the feet, he will take you down. If he doesn't like how the grappling's going, he will stand back up to the feet. So he kind of just like chooses, all right, this is not where I want to be right now. And normally he's right about that in the fight. He's gone out there and taken guys down when it was appropriate. He's gone out there and muscled guys around when it was appropriate. He's gone out there and banged guys out of there when he needed to. But the chin on this guy is suspect. Like, let's just call it the way it is. I mean, Bellato hurt him really bad when they fought in the rematch. Then you look at the fight with, what's his name? Anton Turkalj. Turkalj hurt him on more than one occasion. And there was a point, guys, where Turkalj falls over, throws an up kick from his back, and Petrino just drops like he was like a bag of stones, right? And then he woke back up on top of him, started throwing punches. But I'm telling you, man, like this guy Petrino was very badly hurt in that fight. And Turkalj went 0-4 in the UFC and got cut. And the only guy who didn't finish him is Vitor Petrino. So when you look back at the results, like, yeah, Vitor is a tough guy to deal with. He's not an easy out for anybody. But does that make it minus 600? Like, he could have lost that Turkalj fight with a couple different sequences of position, And then you look at this run that he's had, the Modestas Bukauskas fight, super competitive, super back and forth fight until he hits him with a shot and kills him. And that is the thing that Petrino has. He's got a off switching button, right? He's got that left hook that's very powerful. We've seen Anthony Smith get that right eye closed by the left hook from Spann. That's kind of been a money punch for opponents against Anthony Smith in the past. But when I'm looking at Petrino, man, he looks to me stiff, awkward, upright. I think that the low kicks could be there for Anthony Smith. I think that Anthony Smith can compete with this guy in the boxing, especially on the hand speed. I think it's similar. I just think that the guy who's more durable, the guy who can take a better shot, who's more youthful, who's way more physically strong is going to be Petrino here. But the way that Anthony Smith bullied Ryan Spann the first time they fought, it kind of looked to me like a similar fight to how this could play out in Anthony Smith's ideal world. And the reason I say that is, if you remember, Rich, the Glover Teixeira fight, Anthony Smith fights for 4 minutes like he's, a Muay Thai world champion, and then he falls off a cliff, right? For the 4 minutes of the Ryan Spann fight, the most recent one I'm talking about, he came out like a house on fire. He was beating Spann's ass, and then he slowed down really considerably. So that's why it became such a sketcy decision. I just think about this fight and I say, like, Anthony Smith is completely delusional, right? Like, we all see it in the interviews. He's talking about, I'm going to fight Poatan and these guys, but like, you need delusion as a fighter, especially if you're going to be an old washed fighter and still get wins. You need to have delusional self-belief. And I think that he's willing to go out there and fight this guy. Khalil Roundtree is one fight away from fighting for a title. Like, we can throw dirt on the name of Khalil Roundtree if we want to, but like, as well as I do, if he beats Jamal Hill, he's fighting for the strap, 100%. And then if you look at the other fights that he's had, knocked out Gokhan Saki, legendary kickboxer, he's a fucking stand-up guy. And he went out there and beat a guy in Anthony Smith who had no business standing up with him. And Anthony still was fucking tough. He took way more shots and damage than I expected him to in that fight. If you had to point out what are the attributes of Anthony Smith, he is a tough motherfucker that has some jiu-jitsu and that can fight for, 15 minutes. So it's like, that is normally what Anthony Smith does. He outlasts his opponent. He has, skills in all positions. He can fight on the feet. He can fight on the ground. I think he's better in terms of skills, every single position than Petrino. But I still think he might lose the fight because the physicality gap is so huge. But it is a tempting spot for me, Rich. And I never thought I'd say that. I do think Anthony's washed. But my problem is this. I think that Petrino could look like shit in this fight, and then he's never this price again. In his next fight, it's much more competitively lined, But I'm hopeful. My prayer is that if I don't bet Smith in this fight, Petrino knocks him out in the first round. And then I think we fade Petrino big in the future because I do think the guy is a liability, and I think he's overhyped right now. How do you feel about this one, Rich?
Yeah, Petrino is definitely a future fade, man. I tried doing it last time. You know, I had Petrino as mush of the week when he fought the Aussie Tyson Pedro. Little did I know it was Tyson Pedro's retirement fight, and he was just there to pick up the check. But yeah, even in that fight, he was underwhelming, man. You know, he wasn't doing much of anything. He wasn't aggressive. He wasn't looking for his takedowns. He was happy to stay at range and do fuck all, really. And like I said at the beginning, man, I was deliberating between this one and the last fight, which one was going to be down the letdown spot. And I decided that it's not going to be this one, and Petrino's going to win. Petrino by decision, by the way, maybe a late finish, but probably Petrino by decision because he can get his takedowns at will. I think the physicality gap is too much. You know, obviously he's on all the juice, Petrino. I do think he can just, take Smith down to the mat. He doesn't have the best takedown defense. The only concern for me is the jiu-jitsu. So obviously I went and watched the Devin Clark fight again where Smith won via a triangle. That was funny as fuck, man. Smith puts the triangle, and when as soon as he taps, man, Devin Clark's dad goes fucking ape shit. Like he's screaming and everything. It's at the apex as well, so you can hear it. Just going mad. He couldn't believe it. But I think that was more Devin Clark not being aware of his positioning on the mat. I don't think Petrino's that dumb, man. I don't think he's going to get caught in a triangle. Nobody clip that if it happens. But I just think ultimately Petrino wins the decision. I don't think he gets subbed. I think it's dirty. It's boring. It's him in his guard. Just doing little hammer fists on Smith. Smith looking for his triangles, not looking to get back to his feet. Maybe he blames him for some fucking family drama he had, like he did against Johnny Walker.
They're trying to take everything from my family.
Bro, he's embarrassing, man. I seen some article as well about Smith, and he was talking about how he can't hang up the gloves. It seems like he's got a real problem with that. Who am I to comment on that? I don't know. I ain't a fighter. I imagine it is hard when you've been doing it your whole life, but I just think he's past his sell-by date, but he's just hanging in there for the love of the sport. And hopefully he doesn't get hurt too bad, man. But how bad can you be hurt? You've already had all your fucking teeth knocked out. How bad can it get? But yeah, Petrino for me, and we will fade him another time, but I just don't think this is the one, man.
Yeah, Anthony, I do think like the pros for him is he's tough as shit. And the guys that have been finishing him lately, Khalil Roundtree Jr., Magomed Ankalaev, Glover Teixeira. I mean, those are world championship level fighters. Obviously Khalil being the least proven of them, but like I just think that I think. Spoiler alert, guys. I think that Khalil's going to knock out Jamal Hill. I'm just going to give you guys that one off the rip. I think it could go either way, but I think Jamal is rushing back too fast. I think the ego is a little bit involved with that decision-making, and I think the UFC is more than happy to position Khalil in a spot where he gets another striker in a main event type opportunity. They like Khalil Roundtree. They've given him a lot of setup fights like the Anthony Smith one. But the difference is, if you look at Anthony Smith and Khalil Roundtree, the athleticism gap is huge, but the athleticism gap is on the feet, where Khalil's a killer and he can literally knock out anybody, including world-class kickboxers. Whereas you look at this fight and I'm like, Petrino is not that dangerous on the feet. Like, yeah, he can knock somebody out, but he's kind of stiff and slow. And so he's mostly taking guys to the ground. And the Turkali fight, he got his back taken. The Bellato fight, he got his back taken. Anthony Smith is like a rear naked choke merchant in the light heavyweight division. That's been like all of his wins over anybody you've ever heard of. That's good. It's been Volkan Ozdemir, rear naked choke. Alexander Gustafsson, rear naked choke. Ryan Spann, rear naked choke. That's kind of what he does. And to your point, Devin Clark, that was meme-like with the triangle choke from bottom. So I don't think Anthony's going to triangle him from bottom. But I do think that could Anthony scramble onto this guy's back and potentially finish him? I do think that's possible because I really think Petrino, he's done everything wrong and gotten great results. And that does get you to a certain point, right? You don't need to be technical to win. But I also think like this is a step up in competition. And the line's growing and growing and growing when it's like, man, we just saw this guy minus 250 against Modestas Bukauskas. Like Anthony Smith would be favored against Modestas, I think, still to this day, even though he's less physically able, right? He just has more skills. And, Ryan Spann, better athlete, didn't work out for him either time that they ran it, right? So it's an interesting one for me. But to your point, Rich, I think Petrino by decision is his path. most likely. You know, he's out there with guys, like I said, Turkali, been finished by everybody else. He wasn't able to finish him. I think that Petrino is a risk-averse fighter. When he finished Prachnio, it was because Prachnio was exhausted and just tired of being stuck on bottom. And Anthony Smith, I think, is a better black belt than Prachnio. But that's just the way I see it. They're both black belts, even BJJ.
If Smith gets his submission, I won't be able to sleep for a week, man. I'll be pissed that I missed the Petrino fade, but I'm going with my gut, man.
Yeah, and honestly, my gut says that Petrino's going to win this one too, but I feel the same instinct, and that's why if it gets to like 5-6 to 1 on Smith, I'm probably going to have a very reluctant half unit bet on that side of things. And to answer my guy, Nate Brown in the chat, yes, we did cover Brenner and Orabai. We're about to hit the co-main event of the evening, brother, but appreciate you. And I will go back and timestamp this episode so you can check that out. Shout out to Zach. Shout out to the Dome. Shout out to everybody rocking with us live. We got the co-main event of the evening up next, and we will get our numbers here from Fight Numbers for the co-main event of the evening. Jose Aldo Jr. plus 130 over at Bet365, taking on Jonathan the Dragon Martinez minus 142. The over-under set to minus 400 to the over 1.5 rounds at Bet365. People are expecting this one to go longer, and it's a bantamweight contest, so you can understand that. Rich, how do you feel about this one, my man? I think that you have bullish thoughts on this fight.
Yeah, so I made Martinez mush of the week very early in the week. I commented on Clint's podcast. You know, I tuned in for some of that. I was working late. I wanted to see what was going on. And I left a comment, man, and I feel like everyone's nicking my shit this week. I thought I had like a perfect little angle that nobody would think of, but everyone's fucking regurgitating it now. I didn't do any tape on this fight. I didn't need to, man. I just think that it's a setup, to be honest. You know, the fact that they're putting him on a pay-per-view, Martinez, I think he's been on one before in 11 fights. He's fighting out of the US now. I think he's fought out of the US once in 11 fights. Primarily is at the Apex, you know, fighting fucking Davy Grant and getting slept. So, you know, I think the UFC have scouted the roster and looked for somebody in Martinez who is going to be at a disadvantage before he even steps into the cage. We know how hostile it is in Brazil. You know, this fucker's got to wait 6 hours until the co-main. And then he's got to come out to everybody telling him he's going to die. I don't think he's going to like that. And even more so during fight week, you know, we've seen that stare down with Aldo. And for some reason, this timid little guy who's usually wouldn't say boo to a ghost is getting in Aldo's face, trying to fucking, you know, do the headbutt thing on when they're doing their bloody stare down. What's that all about? I think he's shook. I think he's trying to mask his nerves with overconfidence. Yeah, he's acting a fool, man, and I think he's going to pay for it. Whether Aldo gets the KO, I don't know, but I don't think he's missed a beat, man. People are talking about, oh, Aldo was retired. Now he's re-retired and he's off doing boxing and whatnot. If anything, man, I think that's something to go for Aldo. You know, look at Ngannou when he wanted to fuck off and do boxing. The UFC said, no, you ain't doing that. And they wouldn't allow it. Aldo's their guy, man. If you're kind to the UFC, you know, if they've known you for a minute, if you've done favors for them, if you've been a good champ like Aldo has, you know, he's a vet, been on the roster for 10 plus years. He's a guy they like, man. Like, you know, Anderson Silva. Look at Robbie Lawler when he was on his way out. Who did they give him? Nico fucking Price. And what do? We bet Robbie Lawler and KO because it was a setup. And this is exactly the same situation. Aldo's their guy. They let him go off and do some boxing. This isn't a money grab. Fucking Aldo's wadded, man. He's got all the money he needs. This is about legacy. They didn't want him going out on an L. They've put him in the Hall of Fame. They're bringing him back for one more fight to get him to go out on a W. It's in Brazil. All the odds are stacked against Martinez. People are hyping up his leg kicks because he finished it in his last fight and he finished Cub Swanson. Like, big whoop, man. It's been overstated all week. He ain't chopping down Aldo's legs. He's going to check him. He's going to fuck up his legs, throw the body shots, be aggressive with his, you know, 2-3 punch combinations. The far better striker, man. It's in the big cage, like I alluded to at the beginning of this breakdown. Martinez notoriously is at the Apex. Tiny cage, you know, where he can back these fuckers up. and employ them leg kicks. But what if the leg kick? No, not what if the leg kicks don't work. What about when the leg kicks don't work? Because they're not going to. What's he going to do then, man? He's going to get shook. He's going to get timid. A little bit like Renato Moicano when he fought Jose Aldo. It's like you said earlier on one of the bouts, man. Like, how the fuck do you beat him? Where do you take the fight to beat Aldo? You're going to try and take him down. Good luck with that. I don't know what his percentage of his takedown defense is, but I know it's fucking good. You're going to leg kick him. Good luck with that. He's going to kick you back and defend him. Like, where has Martinez got an advantage? And why the fuck is he the favorite in this fight? And why was everyone on Twitter about to bet the cunt? Like, it just baffles me, man. I got a big bet on Aldo. Martinez is mush of the week. And yeah, he's gonna let everybody down, man. Aldo for the win all day. I think I've covered everything.
I love it. And yeah, I'll try not to regurgitate what you said, but I like Jose Aldo. And the reason being is I think that when you look at the guys he's lost to, this is an argument I've made before. It doesn't work out every time, but I think almost every time it gives you an honest fight, right? And I try and just evaluate quality. And at 37 years of age, there's some unknowns, right? How exactly is he going to look? Is he going to look like himself? I also think you have to ask the question, how much would he need to drop off in order for him to not be competitive here? Because when you look at Jose Aldo's career, he's lost to Alexander Volkanovski, world champion, Merab Dvalishvili, next title challenger at 135 pounds, Petr Yan, former champion at 135 pounds, Max Holloway twice, the fucking current king of the sport, right? After that BMF knockout win, everybody is basically like crowned to Max Holloway, like on your head. He beat him twice. And then Conor McGregor. He lost one time, I think, to Luis Acevedo in 2005. Okay? Those are the guys, right? So unless you're a title challenger, a former champion, nobody's gotten over on this guy. And Norma Dumont just broke the seal on Jermaine Durandamy, right? But we're not talking about 40 some odd years of age, and we're not talking about somebody that had birth, right? Like literally gave birth to a child and then came back. We're talking about Jose Aldo, who's been boxing, who's been training. And when you look at how he pivoted his career late, he had been turning towards boxing a little bit anyway. He had been training with the, Brazilian national boxing team and all these things. So instead of going out there and hammering low kicks as an older fighter, seeing how many other fucking older fighters have broken their leg, by the way, doing that same strategy, he's instead focused on, let me throw my hands. Let me be very precise with my boxing, my combinations upstairs to the body. But we've also seen he's retained the skills. He's a Muay Thai guy. He grew up as a Muay Thai guy. So now he knows how to box. He's very confident, comfortable boxing with people, but he is a guy that can go out there, check kicks, and return. And I think that in that fight, Martinez, he's a guy that I think has limited boxing. I think his hands are okay. When he's throwing straight punches, he can look all right. But most of the time, his chin starts to come up in the air when he's throwing punches. And so he likes to keep it at kicking range or in the clinch. And I think in the clinch, he will get bullied by Jose Aldo. I truly believe that. I think that Jose Aldo is strong. I think that he knows how to use his leverage. To your point, Rich, one of the most difficult guys to take down in the history of the octagon. I think that at 135, the scrambles, the pace can get a little bit worrisome for Aldo unless he's able to lock down a position like the body lock. I think the Chito Vera fight is a great archetype because you see the veteran savvy, the championship experience. I bet him there, Rich. He was a -1 some odd favorite, and he went out there and he had a great first round. And in round 2, Chito Vera was getting off on some offense, and he was starting to look good coming into his own. We know that Chito Vera, round 1, he kind of takes it off. Round 2, he comes back into the fight. Round 3, then it's, Chito takes over, gets the finish. And what did Jose Aldo do, man? He showed so much intelligence by just taking the back, blocking in a body triangle, and riding out the round. He basically gave Chito no chance to win the fight. So I think a lot of people could get burnt on Aldo KO here. I think it's live to happen, but I also think Aldo could go out there and just earn a very workman-like decision against another opponent who's gone to a couple close decisions. Martinez, good fighter, has the low kicks, but most of the guys he's beating with low kicks are guys that are not nearly as proven as Jose Aldo, right? They're guys that are a little bit more on the proving ground themselves. And I think Martinez done a great job. He's put in a bunch of good work. He's gotten some good wins, but I think he's there to be countered. And I think that Davey Grant walked so Jose Aldo could run. I think that Jose Aldo has the same skills, power to land punches, combinations with hands in the pocket when Martinez tries to get off on his shots. And if that's the case, yeah, give me the juiced up King of Rio to come back and remind everybody what time it is. This guy looks like he's on the sauce to my eyes. I did isolate some images he posted of his pre-fight physique. My guy's got bumps on top of bumps on top of abs on top of bumps. So I think the guy is ready to fight. And I think also to your point, Rich, he's wealthy. He has money. So what is he here for? To embarrass himself, to go out on a loss? I think he's going to try and invest in a camp. I think he's going to try and show up with the very best of himself. And I think that he has some advantages in terms of the drugs he could buy and, the other things he could do to prepare for a fight because he's wealthy. And I think that Jonathan Martinez on the other side, very workmanlike guy. Also, from a marketability standpoint, is he a guy that's going to go out there and sell a fight, Rich? Is he going to go out there and make things interesting? Is he going to be a talker? Is he going to say something for the UFC? Can they put him on a poster? And it just starts checking less boxes on the Martinez side, whereas Jose Aldo, he's a household name. He's one of the most popular guys on the card. And they didn't call him the king of Brazil. He's the king of motherfucking Rio de Janeiro. They're back there on Saturday night. I think he's going to win the fight, but hell, it's a hell of a scrap. So let's see.
Yeah. And shout out to you, man, because nobody else has mentioned that. I was about to bring it up. What if he does what he did to Marlon Vera in round 3, does the IQ thing, gives him the vet lesson and puts on the body triangle and burns down the clock? Sometimes you got to do what you got to do in fights, man. And Aldo is definitely capable of that.
And the other thing is, Rich, what if he just submits him? I mean, he never goes for submissions, but just he's an elite black belt, has been for fucking 18 years or whatever. I'm kidding, but it's just the guy's been very, very proficient on the ground his whole career.
Yeah, shout out to Glenn, man. Glenn DM'd me that early in the week. He likes the submission. He's playing it. It's something stupid, man. So yeah, he's gonna love
25 to 1. 25 to 1.
What do you make of the theatrics, man? It's not like Martinez to get in people's faces, is it? It looks like he's making excuses already to me.
So, you're saying the Martinez face-off. What did I make of that?
Yeah.
I don't know what to make of it. I think of Martinez as a guy who's quiet, intense. I do think he's a tough guy. I don't think he's afraid to fight or anything like that. But I also think he's a guy that's quiet and within himself. I do think the Davy Grant fight, the writing was on the wall there. Davy was starting to land big shots in that fight. And I just thought we could see the confidence slowly diminishing. And I think that in this fight, Jose Aldo, if you look back, there's been a couple times where I thought we've seen Aldo self-preserve, right? Meaning Volkanovski, I think would have knocked him dead. Honestly, if they just kept fighting in space, I thought Volk had his number. I thought he had the reads on him. And so Aldo was like, you know what? We're not doing that shit. Grabbed a hold of him, pulled him against the fence. He's like, we're wasting 15 minutes and we're done here, young man. And I think that when I'm looking at the fight, that's the one other thing I think of is I don't think Aldo's going to go out there and get spilt by Martinez at a high clip. Cause I think if he does start to have some bad moments, he's going to preserve himself. He's going to be like, you know what? Let me try and take this kid down. Let me try and push him against the fence. Let me get through this fight as opposed to even trying to win it. So for me, it does feel like a fight where either Aldo's going to finish or the fight's going to go over more often than not. I do think Martinez has good knees. In some ways they're kind of parallels of each other, but I just think Aldo more depth to the skills and has fought at a higher level, a higher pedigree. So I really enjoy his work. I'm a fan of Aldo. I'll just disclose all that up the rip. I'm giving you a little bit of bias, but I also think that the tape backs it up. He's a very good fighter, and Jonathan Martinez, sound fighter in his own right. But I think that he's still got a lot to learn in the game, and I think this is going to be a lesson for him. So let's see how it goes. Next up, my man, the main event of the evening. Fantastic fight. The fight, where Erceg has kind of been brought in as an unknown, a dark horse of the division, right? A guy that's only had 3 fights in the promotion. And the last time out, he finished his Matt Schnell. And I got to give some rare credit. We don't always talk about it, but I was in a space and I thought it was so funny at the time. Man of the Library said, Steve Erceg is going to fight for the title next. Right. And a lot of people, make jokes about Library, and I'm not endorsing his takes broadly, but let's just say he said Erceg's going to get the title shot next before the Schnell fight. Right. And before before Makayev and Perez fought. Right. And so right before that, everybody was thinking Makayev gets to win here. It's going to be a title shot. And he said it's going to be Erceg who gets the title shot next. There you have it. Right. Erceg goes out there, gets the knockout. Makayev gets the decision win. And then what did we end up seeing? They give it to the guy who got the knockout. That's the UFC's bread and butter, right? They want to promote guys to get finishes. They go out there and have exciting wins. And for Makayev, he won the fight, right? He won a more impressive fight against a harder fighter to beat in Alex Perez, but he didn't put a stamp on it. He didn't go out there and get a visual that they could show you in a 30-second commercial that shows this is the guy who's up next for the shot. And because he also looked a little bit suspect in that fight in some positions, I think they thought to themselves, you know what, we'll put Makhachev on the bench right now. We'll sit him back. We'll get him some more experience. But let's see how this goes for Erceg, because Erceg, number one, has the knockout now. That's our highlight. We put that on the commercial, clipped it, ready to go. On top of that, he's been tested in a couple different phases, right? He got cracked on the chin in the Dvorak fight. He got cracked on the chin in the fight with, what's his name? Costa. Right. And in both those fights, he showed good instincts, good recoverability, good footwork. He did not stay in there and just like trade until he got knocked out or something. He showed good self-preservation. And also he showed an ability to mix it up in all phases. He got taken down. He got back up to his feet. There was one time that he showed me something scary, which is against Costa. He did give up his back and Costa fell over the top like a fool, just made a mistake, rushed it, was getting too aggressive, looking for triangles and arm bars and all sorts of things. But Erceg did show he's a very good scrambler. I think that is a high quality part of his game. A lot of guys have tried to scramble with him, wrestle with him, take him down, and he's out there moving, working through positions, but he can't get taken down, and I have seen him flat back. I have seen him get taken down right into the mount. All those things don't bode well against Pantoja, right? And, I did think at first I would be on the Erceg side this week, and I still don't know exactly what I'm going to do with this because the market's moved tremendously. I want to see where this ends up. But I'll tell you, Rich, the more I watch tape, the more I could see how Pantoja, wins this fight and makes it look easy. I could see another world in which Erceg wins the fight because I see for Erceg an ability to push a pace, scramble, land big shots on the feet, but I don't see the greatest finishing instincts. There was a couple times he could have finished Costa in the first round. He took him down, flattened him into the mount, almost had a rear naked choke opportunity, but he kind of rushed that one as well. He could have let the situation materialize. He was short on time. Then you look at some of these other spots. I thought he should have finished Dvorak. I thought he was a higher level fighter than Dvorak, but Dvorak was able to compete with him throughout. It ended up being a closer decision than I even expected. So it does seem to me like a lot of people are on the Erceg side, and he's got a great story. He's got a feel-good story. He's got an ability to win. On the Pantoja side, he's got elite back takes. He's got some power on the feet, but he does look tired to me at the 7.5-minute mark of every fight. Yes, he's going 25-minute distances, but a lot of times he's bailing himself out with back takes and an insane granite chin. I'm telling you guys, most fighters go down to the amount of damage Pantoja takes fight over fight, more often than not. Royval landed cleanly a ton of times. Moreno landed a million shots right on his chin, could not put him down, could not really hurt him that bad even. So the durability of Pantoja has come and go. I thought Askarov was landing huge shots and really did hurt him a few times in that fight, and he slowed down tremendously there as well. So there's many examples of Pantoja slowing down, but he's so slick, he's so hard to outmaneuver. It's a hard fight no matter how good you are. So the championship experience, I would probably make this line if you said, Liam, you're the odds maker. I'd probably put it -125 to -150 for Pantoja because I think that he's more proven at the level, right? More championship experience. And I think he's dangerous in all positions. He's fought 25 minutes hard before, but I don't think Erceg's a guy you can easily count out. I think that the value is probably slightly on Erceg at the odds that I'm telling you, but I don't feel like I need to go out and play it. It's for me a really hard fight to call. It's a lot to ask 3 fights into a UFC career to go headline a pay-per-view in front of a raucous crowd. There's a lot of pressure on Erceg, but he just seems to me like a stoic killer, man. He's been in these big fights in Eternal before, and he looked, pretty sage there. He looked ready to go. Anytime this guy's gotten hurt, he seems like he doesn't get rattled and finds a way back into the fight. So that seems like a guy that could discourage Pantoja. He is 34. That's old as dirt for flyweight. Fascinating fight. How do you feel, Rich? You got stronger thoughts than me. I just think it's a great fight, great matchmaking.
Yeah, flyweight's a weird division, man. I was looking at like the landscape of it the other day. I pulled up the rankings to see, who's going to be champ because I do like Pantoja in this one, but I don't think he's longed to be the champion of the division for a while. He is beatable. I don't think Erceg's going to do it, but I was looking at who else there is, man, and there's not many. It's not a deep division. You got people like Hop and Makhachev, I suppose, but even them, man, they're very beatable. Whoever they fight, they're not great at anything. But yeah, in terms of this fight, man, before it was fight week, I was in Aussie Fight Fans spaces on Twitter, and I said Aldo was going to win, then Erceg was going to flash KO Pantoja, but nobody would give a fuck because they're still high off the Aldo win. But then as I done more tape, as I seen, some people loading up on Erceg, it changed my mind. I looked into it deeper. And what I'll say about this fight is I think fight doesn't go the distance isn't a lock, but it's as good as. And you said it yourself, man. When I watch the fights of Erceg, he slows down, man. I wouldn't say he's gassing, where he's literally fucking going to die, but he does slow down. And we've seen Pantoja, man, the level of grappling between the two, I just think there's levels to the game, man. If Pantoja takes you back and puts that backpack on you, body triangle, it's going to deplete you even more. I don't think this fight sees round 4, man, at all. I think Pantoja's going to finish him. It's probably going to be a submission. People haven't even mentioned the fact that this is the biggest fight of his career. He's had all the media obligations to do. Again, you're in Brazil, travel from Australia. You got a big weight cut as well to boot, to go along with your shit cardio. The occasion could get the better of him, could get the jitters. Who knows? There's just so many question marks on the Erceg side. Yeah, I like Pantoja, man, but like you said, he is very hittable, although he does show a good chin. I do think he's on the juice, Pantoja. Obviously, he's not on the one that builds fucking muscles, but he is on the one that gives you extreme cardio, man, because, he can go for a full 25 minutes, no problem, and keep the same pace. I don't like some things that I see from Erceg. I don't think I like his, he doesn't push the fight. He's happy to sit back and chill a little bit. I don't like to see that from him. I bet him to finish in fights before and he's let me down. I just go with Pantoja to win by submission, man. Nothing too in-depth from me, but I just don't see it. It's too big of an occasion from Erceg. That cardio is a problem. If you're going to bet Erceg, you might as well bet it ITD to finish early in the first 3 rounds, because as the fight gets extended, man, I think that cardio is going to kick his ass and he's going to get finished. Pantoja for me, man.
It's so fascinating because I think that the methods of finish are live in a couple of different ways for these guys. Like, I think Pantoja is right there to be hit all the time in his fights. Like, he's just soldiering damage all the time. And his face was wearing it in a few of his fights. He's got a great will to win. Whoever said that in the chat, that is exactly right. He just does not care. He's willing to take the damage to try and get the victory. But on the other side of things, like, he throws back with authority. He throws back with big, heavy right hands. He loads up on almost every punch that he throws. That's part of the reason Pantoja gets tired. Like, he literally loads up his shots and tries to kill you. And so that's the kind of thing that leads to, like, violence on the feet. I think Pantoja could sub. I think Pantoja could win by KO. I think Erceg could win by KO. I do not think he's submitting Pantoja if they're both, sober. But if he rocks Pantoja really badly, that's the one way I think he could get a submission in this fight. Because if you go back and look, Rich, he is a club and sub guy. Everybody's talking about, Erceg, how's he going to win because he's got all these subs and, like, how's he going to sub Pantoja? He's not going to sub Pantoja by going out there and making a jiu-jitsu match. He would obviously lose if he did that. Pantoja's jiu-jitsu is phenomenal, right? Some of the back takes he hit on Askarov are just unbelievable, right? Like, things that I train all the time. I can't do shit like that. The guys that I know that could do that are all small. So shout out to the 125 pounders, man. They just do it different. That, like, Baron Bolo, the back takes, all the shit he's doing. And the other thing I had to clear up is on my first look, I had said, Erceg just needs to avoid the big power hands and the back take and he'll win the fight. And that's basically how I saw it. But the problem is, the more I looked into Pantoja's ground game, the more I feel like he's not just a back take guy. Like, he has fucking skills everywhere, man. He almost submitted Askarov in like 2 seconds with a guillotine. Askarov, great guillotine defense, was able to, like, invert his neck and, like, pull it back through the hole. But I just think that Pantoja has shown great arm bars, great triangles, great ability to mix through his cycle of submissions. So he's going to make Erceg work in all these positions. It's probably going to be an insane frenetic scramble. And so, to your point, if I was to lay chalk on one or the other, I would prefer to lay the chalk on the fight not to go, the unders type of deal, under 4.5 alternate, something like that, than I would to lay it on a side here, just because I think the scrambles are going to be crazy. The exchanges are going to be crazy. Both guys could probably get rocked in this fight. But if one guy was to steamroll the other and make it look easy, I do think Pantoja is the guy. That's why I would make him a favorite here, because we've seen against other really high-level fighters, how many guys has Perez shut down in the grappling? Everybody that wasn't fucking, and I'm talking about recently, everybody that wasn't Pantoja and Davison Figueiredo, two guys that are both prolific submission artists in their own right. So, man, it's a great fight. I do think Erceg is deserving of the opportunity. Like, I think that if he had gotten 2 more fights in the UFC, he probably would have won him, depending on the right opponents. But like, I think he could have earned this the old fashioned way. I just think that for the sake of parity, they were like, let's get somebody new in there. Let's get somebody who's healthy, coming off a win by knockout. And I don't think he's going to get steamrolled, but I do think he's probably going to end up losing this fight. It's going to come down to me to ends by KO. I want to see what the prices are on that, because I think people are expecting Pantoja to submit him. And I do think that Pantoja wants to swing it out a little bit. If you watch his recent fights, he had said, even in a fight where he won by knockout against Perez, they were talking about on commentary, he told us in the fighter meeting, he's starting to fall in love with his hands. The last fight with Moreno, he almost knocked out Moreno. He hurt him really bad in that fight, had him on wobbly legs. And the same thing is true against Brandon Royval. He hurt Royval as well. And Royval's got a hell of a chin on him. So I just think that the other thing is Erceg, he's not a guy that gives up terrible positions easily. So it could just be a case of Pantoja's got a good position on top, maybe heavy in that half guard, and he just beats him up. Because Erceg can wear some damage. He can get hit with some clean shots. He's Caucasian, right? Caucasians where the damage, they bleed a little bit easier. I'm just telling you guys, you can watch these fights. But I think that for Erceg, the things he's got to manage are, if he can avoid getting taken down in this fight, I think it's going to be a very honest fight. And I think the line will play out even closer than expected, but it's still volatile because I've seen Erceg rock twice in 3 UFC fights, right? I've seen Pantoja rocked in some of these fights. So I think both of them are vulnerable, but hopefully we get a finish, a fun one in the flyweight division, get these guys more opportunities to headline. We just saw that last week, right? Everybody's expecting, hey, it's flyweights, could go either way. And then a booming knockout from Alex Perez, showing that this division still has firepower, still has dynamic capabilities. So Rich, we'll give you the last word here on what you've got to say. Let the people know where they can find you, any work that you've got going on, and appreciate your thoughts today, brother.
Yeah, if you want my bets, man, I got a link in my Twitter bio. I charge $3 per card. We've got a Discord group as well that you get access to. Chat some shit. We live bet the fights. I just want to do a mini announcement at the end of the show. I am removing Clint as one of the horsemen. He's turned shit around. He had a good week last week, and we're best buds now. So I am replacing him with somebody. Tune into my Twitter in the next 10 minutes after the show. I'm going to make an announcement, post the graphic. So it's going to be a big surprise for somebody on MMA Twitter. So that's going to be fun.
I absolutely love it. Guys, I just wanted to show you on the screen before we get out of here, the numbers that I'm talking about, the best price screen from Fight Numbers. This is exactly what I'm referring to when I'm giving odds throughout the show. And it's a really helpful tool for isolating, hey, these are the best available prices right now across a wide range of markets. And it's talking about not just the money lines, but also the over under the round totals. So very helpful resource. If you guys are looking to get involved, it's a 30% discount. Down in the description box below, you use promo code Liam and they will hook you up. The other things that we have in terms of announcements, guys, I was supposed to do my first look last night, the prelim portion. I didn't do it. So what I owe you guys is more content this week. We'll be live post weigh-in show tomorrow. I'm not sure exactly what time. Stay tuned for a time, but it'll be worked in around the training, whether we go before or we go after. We'll make sure we get you guys some bonus content for that. Otherwise, thank you all for watching. God bless you all. Hope you drop a like on this show. Get subscribed to the channel if you're not already, and then come back next week because we're having all the same fun again. Good luck on all your bets, everybody. Come back and we'll see you then. Take care.